When Vivian Sterling grabbed my hand in front of her parents and called me her boyfriend, I knew my quiet life was over. The billionaire CEO was using me, a broke single dad drowning in medical bills, as her shield against a billion-dollar trap. I had 48 hours to learn how to act like I belonged in her world, or we'd both lose everything. But standing in that mansion, holding the hand of the most powerful woman in Chicago, while her father studied me like I was something stuck to his shoe, I realized the real danger wasn't the lie. It was how badly I wanted it to be true. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and let me know where this story finds you. Hit that like button and let's see how far this journey can travel. The fluorescent lights in the Sterling Capitol break room buzzed like angry wasps at 11:30 on a Thursday night. Ethan Walker stood at the coffee maker, watching bitter sludge drip into a styrofoam cup while his vision blurred from exhaustion. The machine wheezed and sputtered, much like Ethan felt most days. "You know that stuff tastes like battery acid, right?" Ethan turned. Marcus Chen from accounting leaned against the doorframe, loosening his tie with the particular relief of someone who'd just survived another soul-crushing quarterly review. "Yeah, well, battery acid keeps me awake." Ethan grabbed his cup, the heat barely registering through his calloused fingers. "Still got 3 reports to finish before I can head home." "Home to that little girl of yours?" Marcus smiled. "How old is she now?" 7, almost 8. Ethan's expression softened despite his exhaustion. "Staying with my mom tonight, again." Marcus winced sympathetically. "How's your mom doing?" "The dialysis is helping. The bills, not so much." Ethan took a sip of the coffee and immediately regretted it. Marcus wasn't wrong about the battery acid comparison. But we're managing. We always manage. That was the lie Ethan told everyone, including himself. The truth lived in his kitchen drawer at home. A stack of medical bills, rubber banded together, the numbers so big they stopped feeling real. His daughter Lily's school tuition payment was already 2 weeks late. The landlord had started leaving pointed voicemails about next month's rent. Managing was generous. Surviving was more accurate. Drowning was closest to the truth. "Well, don't stay too late." Marcus headed toward the elevators. "Even Sterling Capital doesn't actually expect us to live here. They just strongly prefer it." The joke landed flat because it wasn't really a joke. Ethan had been working 70-hour weeks for the past 4 months, ever since his mother's kidney function had crashed and the doctors started using words like transplant and long-term care. His position as senior analyst paid decently by normal standards, but normal standards didn't apply when you were keeping 3 people afloat in one of the most expensive cities in America. The break room emptied. Ethan was alone again with the buzzing lights and battery acid coffee. He made it back to his cubicle on the 42nd floor just as his phone lit up with a text from his mom. "Lily's asleep. Don't worry about rushing home. We're fine." Another lie everyone told. His mother wasn't fine. She was exhausted from watching a 7-year-old all day after spending 4 hours hooked up to a dialysis machine. But she'd never complain, just like Ethan never complained, because complaining required energy neither of them could spare. He set the phone down and opened the Morrison portfolio report. Numbers swam across his screen. Revenue projections, risk assessments, market volatility indexes. All the sterile language that billionaires use to describe other people's money. Ethan was good at this work. Not brilliant, maybe, but solid, reliable. The kind of analyst who caught errors before they became disasters and never made the same mistake twice. It was the kind of competence that kept you employed but never made you rich. The office was a tomb at this hour. Most of the analyst's bullpen had emptied by 8. Even the ambitious associates trying to make partner had given up around 10. Now it was just Ethan and the janitorial staff, plus whatever executives were still locked in their glass offices overlooking the Chicago skyline. He worked for another hour before his eyes started crossing. The Morrison report was due tomorrow, but it would have to be good enough. Ethan saved his progress, shut down his computer, and grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. The coat was 3 years old and starting to show it. The lining was torn near the left pocket, and one of the buttons hung by a thread. Ethan kept meaning to fix it. He kept meaning to do a lot of things. He was halfway to the elevator when he heard her voice. "Mr. Walker." Ethan stopped, turned. Vivian Sterling stood in the doorway of her corner office like a figure carved from ice. She was 30 years old and ran a company worth $8 billion. Her suit probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that managed to be both severe and elegant, and her eyes were the color of winter storms over Lake Michigan. Ethan had seen her exactly 4 times in the 2 years he'd worked at Sterling Capital. Twice in company-wide meetings, where she'd addressed the staff from a stage. Once in an elevator where she'd stood in silence for 17 floors while Ethan tried not to breathe too loudly. And once in passing in the executive hallway when he'd been delivering a time-sensitive report to her CFO. She'd never spoken directly to him before. "Ms. Sterling," Ethan's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I was just heading out. I can see that." She studied him with an intensity that made Ethan want to check if his shirt was buttoned wrong. "Do you have plans this evening?" It was nearly 1 in the morning. Ethan's plans involved collapsing into bed and maybe remembering to eat something before he passed out. "Nothing urgent," he said carefully. "Good." Vivian stepped back into her office. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. Ethan glanced at the elevator, then at Vivian's retreating figure, then back at the elevator. Every instinct screamed that following the CEO into her office at 1 in the morning was a terrible idea. But you didn't say no to Vivian Sterling, not if you wanted to keep your job. He followed her inside. The office was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car. The view stretched across downtown Chicago, buildings glittering like a carpet of broken stars. Vivian's desk was obsessively organized, nothing out of place, every paper stacked at perfect right angles. She moved to a cabinet along the wall and pulled out a bottle of scotch that looked older than Ethan. "Drink?" "I don't usually—" It wasn't really a question. She poured 2 glasses without waiting for his answer, then handed him one. "Sit." Ethan sat in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. The scotch burned going down, but it was the good kind of burn, the kind that cost money. Vivian sat across from him, her own glass untouched. She watched him with those winter storm eyes, and Ethan had the uncomfortable sensation of being X-rayed. "You've been here 2 years, she said. "Senior analyst. Previously worked at Grant & Morrison before we acquired their commercial division. Single father. 1 daughter. You're responsible for approximately 30% of the error catches in your department, despite managing only 15% of the active portfolios." Ethan's mouth had gone dry. "You know a lot about me. I know a lot about everyone who works here." Vivian leaned back in her chair. "That's my job. But you're also one of the few people in this building who's never tried to get my attention. You've never angled for a promotion you didn't deserve. Never used your daughter as leverage for sympathy. Never once tried to get yourself invited to the executive floor." "I'm just trying to do my job." "Exactly." Something flickered across Vivian's face, not quite a smile, but close. "That makes you either exceptionally professional or dangerously naive. I haven't decided which." Ethan took another sip of scotch because he didn't know what else to do. This conversation had left reality somewhere around the 40th floor. "Why am I here, Ms. Sterling?" "Vivian," she corrected, "and you're here because I need something from you. I'm an analyst. If this is about a portfolio, it's not about work." Vivian set her glass down with a soft click. "I need you to come to my house this Saturday evening." The words hung in the air between them. Ethan's brain tried several different interpretations of that sentence and rejected all of them as impossible. "I'm sorry?" "My townhouse. Gold Coast. I'll send you the address." Vivian spoke with the same tone she might use to discuss quarterly earnings. 7 o'clock? Wear something presentable. Not a suit, but not jeans either. Business casual will work. Ms. Sterling." "Vivian, I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking you to show up at my home on Saturday evening." She met his eyes steadily. "That's all you need to know for now." "That's not really an answer," says. "No," Vivian agreed. "It's not, but it's the only answer I'm giving you tonight." Ethan should have said no, should have stood up, apologized for the confusion, and walked out of that office before the situation got any stranger. But there was something in Vivian's expression, something that looked almost like desperation hiding behind the ice. "If I do this," he said slowly, "whatever this is, I need your word that it won't affect my job." "Your job is safe regardless of your answer." Vivian stood, signaling the conversation was over. "But I think you'll come. You're curious, and you're too polite to refuse a direct request from your CEO." She wasn't wrong on either count. Ethan rose, setting the half-finished scotch on her desk. Saturday, Vivian repeated. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Ethan left her office in a daze. The elevator ride down felt like descending through layers of dream logic. By the time he reached the ground floor, he'd half convinced himself the entire conversation had been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and terrible coffee. But Saturday came anyway. Ethan spent most of that afternoon trying to figure out what business casual meant to a billionaire. He settled on dark slacks and a button-down shirt that was only slightly wrinkled. His mother had taken Lily to a birthday party, which meant he didn't have to explain why he was getting dressed up to visit his boss's house on a weekend. The address Vivian had texted him led to a townhouse in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Chicago. The kind of place where doormen wore uniforms and the lobby had actual art instead of posters. Ethan's monthly rent wouldn't cover a week in a building like this. He stood outside for a full minute, seriously considering just turning around and going home. Then he rang the doorbell. Vivian answered almost immediately. She was wearing dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, the most casual Ethan had ever seen her. It made her look younger, almost approachable. "You came?" she said. "You didn't exactly give me a choice." "Everyone has a choice, Mr. Walker." She stepped aside. "Come in." The interior of the townhouse was exactly what Ethan expected. High ceilings, expensive furniture, art that probably cost more than his car. But it also felt strangely impersonal, like a hotel suite designed by someone who'd read about human homes in a textbook. "Nice place," Ethan managed. "It's a place." Vivian closed the door behind him. "There's something you need to understand before we go any further. What I'm about to ask you is going to sound insane. Plus, more insane than inviting your employee to your house under mysterious circumstances?" The corner of Vivian's mouth twitched. "Significantly more insane, but I'm out of options. And I think," she paused, "I think you're one of the few people who might actually help me without trying to exploit the situation." Before Ethan could respond, voices drifted from another room. Vivian's expression shifted, ice sliding back into place. "They're already here," she said quietly. "Listen carefully. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to walk into that dining room with you. My parents are going to be sitting at the table. And when they ask who you are, I'm going to tell them you're my boyfriend." Ethan stared at her. "You're what?" "I need you to play along." Vivian's voice was urgent now, low and fast. "Just for tonight, just through dinner, please." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." She grabbed his hand, her fingers were cold, and pulled him toward the dining room. "I'll explain everything after, but right now I need you to trust me." I don't even know you." "I know, but you're here anyway." She was right about that. And before Ethan could process what was happening, they were walking through an archway into a dining room where two people sat at a table set for four. Vivian's parents looked exactly like people who'd founded an $8 billion company. Her father was in his mid-60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit even on a Saturday evening. Her mother was elegant in a way that came from money and breeding. Her jewelry understated, but undoubtedly worth more than Ethan's annual salary. They both looked at Ethan like he was something that had wandered in from the street. "Mother? Father?" Vivian's voice was perfectly controlled. "This is Ethan Walker, my boyfriend." The silence that followed could have flash-frozen the lake. Vivian's father recovered first. "You're what?" "My boyfriend." Vivian squeezed Ethan's hand hard enough to hurt. "We've been seeing each other for a few months. I thought it was time you met him." Ethan's brain had completely short-circuited. He was standing in a billionaire's townhouse, holding his boss's hand while she lied to her parents about their relationship. This was insane. This was career suicide. This was... "It's nice to meet you both," he heard himself say. "Vivian's told me a lot about you." The lie came out smooth as silk. Maybe it was the absurdity of the situation. Maybe it was the desperation he'd seen in Vivian's eyes. Maybe he'd just finally snapped from exhaustion and stress. Vivian's mother found her voice. "You never mentioned you were seeing anyone. I like to keep my private life private." Vivian guided Ethan to the table, her hand still locked around his. "Surely you understand that." Her father's eyes narrowed. "What do you do, Mr. Walker?" I'm an analyst. At Sterling Capital, actually." Ethan sat in the chair Vivian pulled out for him. That's how we met. An analyst. Her father said it like he was identifying a particularly interesting species of insect. How long have you worked for my daughter? 2 years. But we didn't start seeing each other until recently. The lies were getting easier. That probably said something terrible about Ethan's character. Vivian's mother leaned forward. And you have a child, don't you? A daughter. Ethan's blood went cold. How did you... We know everything about the people in our daughter's life, her father said. It's called being thorough. Your daughter is 7. You're raising her alone. Your mother has stage 4 kidney disease. You're carrying approximately $80,000 in medical debt. The room tilted slightly. They'd investigated him. Of course they had. Rich people didn't let unknown variables near their children without running a full background check. Yes, Ethan said quietly. That's all true. Then you can understand, Vivian's father continued, why we might be concerned about your intentions toward our daughter. Dad, Vivian's voice was sharp. That's enough. It's a reasonable question. It's an insulting question, and you know it. She turned to Ethan, and for just a second her mask slipped. There was something vulnerable in her eyes, something that made his chest tighten. I'm sorry. I should have prepared you better. It's fine, Ethan said, even though nothing about this was fine. Dinner was excruciating. Vivian's parents asked questions designed to poke holes in their story. Where did they go on their first date? What did Ethan think of Vivian's work schedule? Had they discussed long-term plans? Each question was a trap wrapped in polite conversation. Ethan improvised answers, trying to match Vivian's lead. They'd gone to a quiet restaurant in Lincoln Park. Yes, her work schedule was demanding, but he understood the pressure of her position. No, they hadn't made any long-term plans yet, but they were taking things one day at a time. The lies built on each other, creating a fake relationship out of thin air. Through it all, Vivian kept her hand near his. Not holding it, that would have been too obvious. But close enough that their fingers occasionally brushed. Each touch felt like a reminder. Keep going. Almost through this. Dessert arrived. Some elaborate chocolate thing that probably required a culinary degree to create. Ethan pushed it around his plate while Vivian's father asked about his education, and Vivian's mother made pointed comments about the importance of compatible backgrounds. We should get going, Vivian said finally. Ethan has to pick up his daughter soon. It was a lie. Lily was spending the night at his mother's, but it gave them an escape route. Her parents didn't argue. They walked Ethan and Vivian to the door with the forced politeness of people who hadn't gotten the answers they wanted. It was interesting to meet you, Mr. Walker, Vivian's father said. The word interesting carried enough weight to sink a ship. You too, sir. Vivian practically dragged Ethan out of the townhouse. They made it 2 blocks before she finally released his hand and sagged against a building. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. That was completely insane? Ethan's hands were shaking. Because that was completely insane, Vivian. I know. You used me. You ambushed me into lying to your parents about a fake relationship. I know. She looked at him, and there was none of the CEO ice left now, just exhaustion and something that might have been fear. I'll explain everything, I promise, but not here. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm about to tell you the truth. Vivian straightened, pulling herself together with visible effort. And because once you hear it, you're going to understand why I had no other choice. Ethan should have walked away, should have told her to find someone else to manipulate. But he was already in this mess, and some masochistic part of him needed to know why. Talk, he said. They ended up at a 24-hour diner 6 blocks away. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of battery acid. Vivian looked wildly out of place in her expensive sweater, sitting across from Ethan in a booth held together with duct tape. She ordered coffee, didn't touch it, just wrapped her hands around the mug like she needed something to hold on to. 6 months ago, she began, the board started pushing me toward a merger with Cross Industries. Damian Cross, their CEO, has been circling Sterling Capital for years. He wants access to our commercial real estate portfolio and our client base in the Pacific Northwest. I know who Damian Cross is, Ethan said. Everyone in finance knew Damian Cross. He was brilliant, ruthless, and had a reputation for crushing anyone who stood in his way. The merger makes sense on paper, Vivian continued. It would create the largest commercial investment firm in the Midwest. But there's a catch. Damien wants more than a merger. He wants control. Can't you just refuse? It's not that simple. Vivian's jaw tightened. My parents control 40% of Sterling Capital's voting shares. I control 35%. The remaining 25% is divided among senior partners. Damien has been quietly courting those partners for months. He's convinced at least 3 of them to support the merger. So you'd still have the votes to block it? I would, except my parents have decided that Damien is exactly the kind of man I should marry. Ethan's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. They want you to marry him. They think he's perfect, successful, connected, from the right kind of family. They've been pressuring me to start dating him, publicly. Vivian's voice was bitter. 3 weeks ago, they told me that if I don't agree to a formal courtship by the end of January, they'll vote with Damien on the merger. That's blackmail. That's family. She finally met his eyes. The merger contracts Damien proposed include a clause that would reduce my voting rights to an advisory position. I'd be CEO in name only. He'd control everything. Why would your parents agree to that? Because they think I need guidance. Because they're tired of fighting me on every decision. Because Damien convinced them that he'd protect the company's legacy better than their stubborn daughter ever could. Ethan sat back. The pieces were starting to fit together in a picture that made his stomach hurt. So you invented a boyfriend, he said slowly. Someone to prove you're already in a relationship. Someone to make them back off. Yes. Why me? None. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Because you're real, she said finally. Everyone else in my life wants something from me. A promotion, a connection, access to money or power. But you've never asked me for anything. You just do your work and go home to your daughter. You're not trying to climb any ladder. You're just trying to survive. That's a pretty low bar for trust. Maybe, but it's the only bar I have left. She leaned forward. I need you to keep pretending, just for a few weeks. Long enough to convince my parents and the board that I'm not available. Long enough to buy me time to find another way out of this mess. And what do I get out of this? The question came out harsher than Ethan intended, but he was too tired and too angry to soften it. He just spent 2 hours lying to billionaires on behalf of a woman he barely knew. He deserved something better than vague promises. Vivian didn't flinch. I'll pay off your mother's medical bills, she said. All of them. And I'll set up a trust for your daughter's education. College, graduate school, whatever she needs. You'll never have to worry about money again. The offer hit Ethan like a physical blow. $80,000 in debt, gone. Lily's future, secured. No more 70-hour weeks. No more lying awake at night doing math that never quite added up. You can't just buy people, he said weakly. I'm not buying you. I'm asking for your help. And I'm offering fair compensation for your time and the risk you're taking. Vivian's voice softened. I know what I'm asking is insane. I know I ambushed you tonight, and that wasn't fair. But I'm desperate, Ethan, and I think you understand what desperation feels like. She was right. He did understand. Oh, he lived it every single day. How long? He asked. 6 weeks. Maybe 8. Just long enough to get through the January board meeting. After that, we can stage a quiet breakup. You'll be free. 6 weeks of pretending to date a billionaire. 6 weeks of lying to her parents and probably half of Chicago's financial elite. 6 weeks of maintaining a fiction that could explode in his face at any moment. Against all of that, his daughter's future, his mother's health. A life where he didn't have to choose between rent and medication. I need to think about it, Ethan said. That's fair. Vivian pulled out her phone and typed quickly. I just sent you my personal number. Call me when you decide. But Ethan, she looked up. I need to know by Monday morning. My parents are expecting to see you again next weekend. They left the diner separately. Vivian disappeared into a car that probably cost more than Ethan would make in 5 years. Ethan walked to the L station and rode home in a train car covered in graffiti, surrounded by the smell of humanity and public transit. His apartment was dark and quiet. Lily wouldn't be home until tomorrow afternoon. Ethan sat on his couch in the dark, staring at nothing. He thought about his daughter, about the trust fund that could change her entire life. He thought about his mother, about the relief in her eyes if she didn't have to worry about medical bills anymore. He thought about the stack of past due notices in his kitchen drawer. Then he thought about Vivian's face when her father had interrogated him at dinner, the way her mask had slipped for just a second, showing something raw underneath. He pulled out his phone, stared at Vivian's number. 2 months ago, Lily had asked him why they couldn't go on vacation like her friend Emma's family. Ethan had explained that they couldn't afford it right now, but maybe next year. Lily had nodded like she understood, but she was 7. She shouldn't have to understand about money problems. Ethan typed a message before he could overthink it. I'm in, but we need to meet tomorrow and figure out the details. All of them. The response came 30 seconds later. Thank you. I'll make this right. I promise. Ethan stared at his phone for a long time after that, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Outside his window, Chicago glittered like it had money to burn. Somewhere in that city, Vivian Sterling was probably sitting in her immaculate townhouse, planning her next move in whatever chess game she was playing with her parents and Damian Cross. And Ethan Walker, single father and senior analyst, had just agreed to be one of her pieces. He should have been terrified, and he was. But underneath the fear was something else, a weird, reckless curiosity about where this insanity might lead. His phone buzzed again. Get some sleep. We have a lot of work to do. Ethan laughed, a short bark of sound in his empty apartment. Sleep. Right, because that was going to happen tonight. He set his phone down and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out how he was going to explain any of this to his mother. She'd see right through any lie he tried to tell. She always did. The smart thing would be to call Vivian back and tell her he'd changed his mind. The safe thing would be to forget this whole mess and go back to his quiet, drowning but predictable life. But Ethan had spent 2 years being smart and safe, and it had gotten him nowhere except deeper in debt and closer to breaking. Maybe it was time to try something insane instead. Ethan met Vivian the next afternoon at a coffee shop 3 blocks from his apartment. Not one of those places with exposed brick and artisanal pastries, but a regular chain location where nobody would recognize either of them. She sat in the corner wearing sunglasses despite the gray January weather, a baseball cap pulled low over her dark hair. Subtle, Ethan said, sliding into the seat across from her. I'm not particularly good at hiding. Vivian pushed a folder across the table. Everything you need to know is in here, my background, my family, the people you'll need to convince. There's also a contract. A contract? For the financial arrangement. I want everything in writing so there's no confusion later. She tapped the folder. Read it carefully. If there's anything you're uncomfortable with, we'll adjust it. Ethan opened the folder. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. Payment terms, confidentiality clauses, a clear outline of expectations. No hidden traps that he could see. The number at the bottom made his vision blur slightly. This is more than you said last night. I had my lawyer adjust it this morning. The original offer didn't account for the time commitment or the emotional labor involved. Vivian's voice was matter-of-fact. You'll be attending events, meeting my colleagues, probably dealing with reporters eventually. That's worth more than just paying off debt. You had a lawyer draw this up overnight? I have lawyers on retainer for exactly this kind of situation. You have situations like this often? But the corner of Vivian's mouth twitched. First time, actually, but I have lawyers for everything else, so why not this? Ethan read through the contract twice. The language was clear enough for someone without a law degree to understand. He'd pretend to be Vivian's boyfriend for 8 weeks. Attend whatever event she needed him at. Maintain the fiction in front of her parents, colleagues, and anyone else necessary. In exchange, his mother's medical debt would be paid off immediately, and a trust fund would be established for Lily's education. There was also a clause about discretion. If Ethan went public with any of this, talked to reporters, posted on social media, anything that could damage Vivian's reputation, the agreement would be void, and he'd owe back the full amount plus penalties. This confidentiality section, Ethan said, it survives the end of the agreement. Yes, this can never become public knowledge. Not next month, not next year, not in 20 years when someone wants to write a book about Sterling Capital. Vivian leaned forward. I'm trusting you with something that could destroy me professionally. I need to know that trust is permanent. What happens if someone figures it out anyway? Then we deal with it together. But as long as neither of us talks, there's no story. Just two people who dated briefly and moved on. Ethan set the contract down. Your parents are going to investigate me again, deeper this time. They already have. I got a text from my father at 6 this morning with a full dossier. Vivian pulled out her phone and showed him a message thread. Your credit score, your employment history, your mother's medical records, your daughter's school transcripts, even a psychological profile based on your social media activity. I barely use social media. They noted that too, called it refreshingly discreet and possibly concerning. She put the phone away. The point is, they're not going to find anything that contradicts our story. You're exactly what you appear to be, a decent guy in a tough situation. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation. And yes, it's a compliment. Vivian's expression softened slightly. Most people I know are performing some version of themselves. You're just trying to survive. There's something honest about that. Ethan thought about the lie he'd told his mother that morning when she asked why he seemed distracted. Honest was relative, apparently. When do we start? He asked. Tonight. My parents are hosting a small dinner party. 20 people, mostly board members and their spouses. You'll come as my date. She saw his expression and added, I know it's fast, but we need to establish the relationship quickly before Damien makes his next move. What's his next move? I don't know yet. That's what worries me. Vivian stood, gathering her things. I'll send a car for you at 6:30. Wear the same outfit from last night. You looked good. She was gone before Ethan could process that last comment. The car that picked him up that evening was absurdly nice. Leather seats, a driver in an actual uniform, enough legroom for someone twice Ethan's height. He spent the 20-minute drive trying not to touch anything expensive. Vivian's parents lived in a house that made their daughter's townhouse look modest by comparison. 3 stories of old Chicago money, the kind of place that had been in the family for generations. Ethan could see other guests arriving, men in suits that cost more than his monthly salary, women in dresses that probably required insurance policies. He was so far out of his depth he couldn't even see the surface anymore. Vivian met him at the door. She was wearing a black dress that was simultaneously elegant and severe, her hair swept up in a way that showed off her neck. She looked like she'd been carved from marble. Breathe, she said quietly. You look like you're about to pass out. I'm about to lie to a room full of billionaires. Passing out seems reasonable. You're not lying, you're acting. There's a difference. She took his arm, her hand warm against his jacket. Just follow my lead. Laugh at their jokes even if they're not funny. Agree with their opinions even if you don't. And whatever you do, don't mention politics or religion. What's left to talk about? Sports, weather, how talented their children are. Vivian guided him into the house. Rich people are incredibly boring when you get right down to it. The interior was exactly what Ethan expected. Chandelier, marble floors, art that belonged in museums. A waiter offered champagne from a silver tray. Ethan took a glass just to have something to hold. Vivian! A woman in her 50s descended on them, air-kissing Vivian's cheeks. And this must be the mysterious boyfriend we've heard so much about. Hello, Patricia. Vivian's smile was perfectly calibrated. This is Ethan Walker. Ethan, this is Patricia Chen. She and her husband own the 3rd largest construction firm in Illinois. It's lovely to meet you, Patricia said, studying Ethan like he was a house she was considering buying. Richard tells me you work in the analyst division. How refreshing that Vivian found someone who understands the business. I'm still learning, Ethan said. The company's pretty complex. Oh, I'm sure you're being modest. Richard speaks highly of your work. Ethan had no idea who Richard was, but he smiled and nodded. The conversation continued for another 5 minutes before Patricia drifted away to interrogate someone else. You did well, Vivian murmured. But don't sell yourself short like that. These people respect confidence. These people terrify me. Good. Fear will keep you sharp. Oh. They made their way through the crowd. Vivian introduced Ethan to what felt like 50 different people. each one more intimidating than the last. Board members, senior partners, the CFO of a pharmaceutical company, a federal judge. Every single person studied Ethan with the same calculating expression, trying to figure out what angle he was working, because that's what people like this assumed, that everyone had an angle. Ethan was in the middle of a conversation about commercial real estate trends when he saw him. Damian Cross stood near the windows, holding court with three older men who hung on his every word. He was in his late 30s, handsome in the way of men who'd never had a door closed in their face, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. He was also staring directly at Ethan. "That's him," Ethan said quietly. Vivian followed his gaze. Her entire body went rigid. "I didn't know he'd be here," she said. "Is that a problem?" "It's a complication." She drained her champagne. "He's going to want to meet you. Try not to punch him." "Why would I punch him?" "You'll see." Damian excused himself from his group and crossed the room. He moved like someone who owned every space he entered, his smile sharp and practiced. "Vivian," he said warmly, "you look stunning as always." "Damian," Vivian's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "I didn't realize you'd be attending tonight. Your father invited me. I hope you don't mind." His eyes slid to Ethan. "And you must be the new boyfriend, Ethan Walker, correct? I've heard interesting things." He extended his hand. Ethan shook it, feeling the pressure Damian put into the grip. A dominance play, obvious and childish. "Just Ethan is fine," he said evenly. "Ethan, of course." Damian's smile widened. "I hear you're an analyst. That must be fascinating work." The condescension dripped from every word. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "It has its moments," he said. "I'm sure. Though I imagine it's quite different from executive-level strategy. All those spreadsheets and projections." Damian turned to Vivian. "No offense to your department, of course. Someone has to handle the numbers." "The numbers keep the company running," Vivian said coldly. "But I wouldn't expect you to understand that, given how often Cross Industries misreports its quarterly earnings." Damian's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Careful, Vivian. Some might interpret that as a serious accusation. Some might be correct." The tension was thick enough to cut. Ethan could feel other guests starting to notice, conversations trailing off as people turned to watch. "Well," Damian said after a moment, "I can see why you two get along, both so earnest." He looked at Ethan again. "Tell me, how does it feel to date someone who controls your entire career? That must create some interesting power dynamics." "It's not like that," Ethan said. "No, she's the CEO. You're several levels below middle management. She could fire you with a phone call. But I'm sure that doesn't affect your relationship at all." "Damian!" Vivian's voice was sharp. "I'm just making conversation." Damian raised his hands in mock surrender. "No need to get defensive. I think it's admirable, actually. Most men would be intimidated by a woman with Vivian's success. But you seem very comfortable with the arrangement." The implication was clear. That Ethan was with Vivian for money, for advancement, for anything except actual feeling. It made his blood boil, which was ironic given that 2 days ago he'd agreed to exactly that kind of arrangement. "I'm with Vivian because she's brilliant and honest and doesn't play games with people's lives," Ethan said. Each word came out harder than the last. "But I can see why that might be a foreign concept to you." The room went completely silent. Damian's expression didn't change, but his eyes went flat. "Fascinating. It seems you found someone willing to fight your battles for you, Vivian. How modern." "I fight my own battles," Vivian said. "Ethan just happens to have better manners than most people in this room." "Better manners?" Damian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what we're calling it?" He turned back to Ethan. "Enjoy your champagne, analyst. I'm sure it tastes better when someone else is paying." He walked away, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Ethan's hands were shaking. He set down his champagne glass before he could drop it. "I'm sorry," Vivian said quietly. "He's worse than I expected." "That's the man who wants to marry you?" "That's the man who wants to own me. There's a difference." She touched his arm lightly. "Come on, let's get some air." They escaped to a balcony overlooking the backyard. The January cold was brutal, but Ethan needed it to clear his head. Behind them, The party continued in muted conversation. I almost punched him, Ethan admitted. I noticed. I appreciated the restraint. Vivian leaned against the railing. You didn't have to defend me like that. Yes, I did. He was being an ass. He's always an ass. That's not new. Then why do your parents want you to marry him? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Because he's successful and connected and from the right kind of family. Because they think I need someone strong enough to handle me. Because they've decided that love is less important than strategic advantage. That's insane. That's wealth. She looked at him. You asked me yesterday why I chose you. Part of it was what I said, that you're not trying to use me. But part of it was that I knew you'd understand what it means to be trapped by circumstances you can't control. Ethan thought about his stack of medical bills, his mother's dialysis schedule. The way Lily's eyes had lit up when he told her they might be able to afford summer camp this year. Yes, he said, I understand that. Damien's going to be a problem, Vivian continued. He's not going to back off just because I'm dating someone. If anything, tonight probably made him more determined. So what do? We stick to the plan. We make this relationship look as real as possible. We give him no opening to question it. She straightened. Which means you're going to have to come to more events like this. Meet more people. Convince them we're legitimate. Great. More champagne and passive-aggressive billionaires. Welcome to my world. Vivian smiled, and for a second she looked almost vulnerable. Thank you for what you said in there. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. That's what boyfriends do, right? Defend their girlfriends from assholes? Fake boyfriends, you mean? Right, fake. But the word felt strange in his mouth. They went back inside. The party dragged on for another 2 hours. Ethan smiled and nodded and made small talk with people whose net worth had more zeros than he could count. Vivian stayed close to him, her hand occasionally touching his arm or his back, small gestures that looked natural but felt choreographed. By the time they left, Ethan's face hurt from smiling. The car ride back to his apartment was quiet. Vivian stared out the window at the passing streetlights, her expression unreadable. You're going to need better clothes, she said suddenly. No offense, but that shirt's been washed too many times. The collar's fraying. I can't afford. I'll cover it. Consider it part of the arrangement. She pulled out her phone. I'll send you to my tailor tomorrow. Get fitted for 3 suits and some casual pieces. Nothing too flashy, but quality. Vivian, this isn't charity, Ethan. It's business. You can't show up to these events looking like you dressed from a clearance rack. People notice things like that. He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some shred of pride. But she was right. He'd felt the way people's eyes had lingered on his worn shoes, his slightly too loose belt. Fine, he said. The car pulled up to his building. Vivian looked at the cracked concrete steps and the flickering security light. This is where you live? Yeah, not exactly Gold Coast, but it's ours. I wasn't judging. I was just... She trailed off. When's the last time you had a night off? Define night off. Jesus, Ethan. I'm fine. We're managing. Stop saying that. Her voice was sharper than he expected. You're not managing. You're drowning. There's a difference. Says the woman being blackmailed by her own parents. Vivian laughed, a short, bitter sound. Fair point. We're both drowning. At least we have company. Ethan climbed out of the car, then hesitated. Hey, Vivian, you're not as cold as everyone thinks you are. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. Don't let that get around. It would ruin my reputation. The car pulled away. Ethan climbed the steps to his apartment, fumbling with his keys. Inside, his mother was asleep on the couch, the TV playing quietly. Lily was curled up in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. The tailor's address. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't be late. Then another message. You did well tonight, better than I expected. Ethan stared at the words for longer than necessary, trying to figure out why they made his chest feel tight. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a surreal routine. During the day, Ethan worked his regular analyst job, crunching numbers and reviewing portfolios. At night and on weekends, he became someone else. Vivian Sterling's devoted boyfriend, attending dinners and charity events and gallery openings. The new clothes helped. The suits fit perfectly, making him look like he belonged in rooms full of executives. But he still felt like an imposter, waiting for someone to call him out. Vivian coached him through it. She taught him which fork to use at formal dinners, how to make small talk with people who bored him senseless, the difference between a Rothko and a Pollock when someone inevitably asked his opinion about modern art. "You're a quick study," she said one evening after a particularly grueling cocktail party. "Most people take months to learn this stuff. I'm highly motivated. The money helps." She flinched slightly at that, and Ethan immediately regretted it. "I didn't mean, no, you're right. That's what this is, a transaction." But she sounded tired when she said it. The meetings with Vivian's parents became regular occurrences. Sunday dinners where her father grilled Ethan about market conditions, and her mother made pointed comments about his daughter's education. Ethan learned to deflect, to answer questions without revealing too much, to maintain the careful fiction of a man who was dating Vivian for love rather than survival. Sometimes the line between fiction and reality got blurry, like the time Vivian showed up at his apartment unannounced on a Thursday evening. She was still in her work clothes, her hair slightly disheveled from the wind. "I needed to get out of that office," she said. "Can I come in?" Lily was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up when Vivian entered. Homework her eyes going wide. "You're Daddy's friend from work," she said. "That's right. I'm Vivian." She crouched down to Lily's eye level. "What are you working on?" "Math. I hate math." "Math is actually very useful. It helps you understand how things work." "That's what Daddy says, but numbers are boring." Vivian glanced at the worksheet. "What if I told you that math could help you build things, design buildings, create video games, figure out how much money you'd need to buy a horse?" Lily's interest perked up. "I want a horse." "Then you need to learn math, because horses are expensive and you'll need to budget for food and veterinary care and training." For the next 20 minutes, Vivian helped Lily work through her homework, explaining concepts in ways that made them click. Ethan watched from the doorway, something warm and uncomfortable growing in his chest. When Lily finally finished, she beamed at Vivian. "Can you come help me with homework again?" "Maybe," Vivian said, "if your dad doesn't mind." "Ooh, I don't mind," Ethan said quietly. After Lily went to bed, Vivian stayed. They sat at his tiny kitchen table drinking cheap wine from mismatched glasses. "You're good with kids," Ethan observed. "I used to volunteer at a youth center in college, before my father decided it was a waste of time and made me focus on business school." She swirled her wine. Sometimes I miss having something real to do, something that matters beyond quarterly earnings." Running an $8 billion company matters. Does it? Or am I just pushing money around while pretending it means something? She looked at him. "You have something real. Your daughter, your mother, people who need you for more than just your signature on documents. My life isn't exactly glamorous." "No, but it's honest." She finished her wine. "I should go. We have that Sterling Capital holiday gala tomorrow night, the big one. I remember, monkey suit required." "But, it's not that bad. There will be dancing." Ethan groaned. "Nobody said anything about dancing. I'm saying it now. You need to know how to waltz, or at least fake it well enough that we don't embarrass ourselves." She stood, grabbing her coat. "I'll send you some YouTube tutorials." "You're kidding." "I never kid about waltzing, Ethan. It's serious business." She left, and the apartment felt emptier than usual. The gala was the biggest event yet. Sterling Capital rented out the entire top floor of a downtown hotel, transforming it into something out of a period drama. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet playing in the corner, 300 people in evening wear, all of them connected to the company in some way. Ethan's new tuxedo fit perfectly, but he still felt like he was wearing a costume. He stood near the bar, nursing a drink and trying not to panic about the dancing situation. "You clean up nice," a voice said. Marcus from accounting had appeared beside him, also uncomfortable looking in formal wear. "Marcus, didn't know you'd be here." "All senior staff got invites this year." New company policy. Marcus grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter. Rumor is the CEO wanted to make the event more inclusive. Though between you and me, I think most of us would prefer a bonus instead of forcing small talk with executives. Yeah, I can see that. Speaking of the CEO, is it true you're dating her? Ethan's stomach dropped. Where did you hear that? Office gossip. You've been seen at events together. Someone's assistant's cousin saw you two at that restaurant in Lincoln Park. Marcus grinned. Come on, man, give me something. Is she as intimidating in person as she is in company meetings? She's... Ethan searched for words. She's not what people think. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Marcus laughed. Fair enough. Just be careful, yeah? Office romances are tricky enough without adding a massive power differential into the mix. He wandered off, leaving Ethan feeling vaguely sick. The gossip was spreading, people were talking, which was the point of this whole charade, but it still made his skin crawl. There you are. Vivian appeared at his elbow, looking stunning in a dark blue gown that probably cost more than his car. Her hair was down for once, falling in waves over her shoulders. You look... Ethan's brain short-circuited slightly. That's a nice dress. A nice dress. How eloquent. But she was smiling. Come on, we need to make an entrance before everyone assumes I'm hiding. She took his hand and led him into the main ballroom. Heads turned as they entered. Conversations paused. Ethan felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes assessing them. Vivian held his hand tighter. Smile, she murmured. Look like you're happy to be here. I'm terrible at lying. Then think about something that actually makes you happy. He thought about Lily's laugh when he told her terrible jokes, the way his mother's face had looked when he'd told her he could cover her next round of medical bills, the strange warmth in his chest when Vivian had helped his daughter with math homework. The smile came easier than expected. They worked the room together. Vivian introduced him to more board members, more executives, more people whose names Ethan immediately forgot. He shook hands until his palm hurt and made small talk until his brain felt numb. Then the music shifted. The string quartet transitioned into a waltz, and couples began moving onto the dance floor. Time to dance, Vivian said. I watched maybe 10 minutes of YouTube videos. I'm going to step on your feet, Jay. Then step on them. Just make it look intentional. She pulled him onto the floor before he could protest. Her hand settled on his shoulder, his hand found her waist, and suddenly they were moving. Ethan had expected to be terrible at this, but Vivian led with a subtle pressure that made following easy, and the waltz was less complicated than he'd feared. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Turn. You're not bad at this, Vivian said. You're a good teacher. I've had a lot of practice. My parents made me take ballroom dancing lessons every summer from age 6 to 16. She guided him through a turn. I hated every minute of it. Why? Through a set. Because it was about performance, not joy. Everything in my life has been about performance. She looked up at him. This is the first time in a long time that something's felt different. Different how? I don't know yet. They danced in silence for a while, moving through the crowd of couples. The music swelled and faded. Ethan became aware of how close they were, how her perfume smelled like something expensive and slightly floral, how her hand felt in his. This was fake. He needed to remember that. This was a transaction, a performance, a carefully constructed lie to save her company and his finances. But it didn't feel fake right now. Ethan, Vivian said quietly, thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy. You're paying me a lot of money. That makes it easier. Is that the only reason you're doing this? The question caught him off guard. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something vulnerable in her expression. I don't know anymore, he admitted. Before she could respond, someone cut in. Mind if I steal a dance? Damien Cross stood beside them, his smile sharp. Yes, actually, Vivian said coldly. I'm dancing with my boyfriend. Just one dance for old time's sake. Damien's eyes glittered with something mean. Unless Ethan is too insecure to let you out of his sight for 3 minutes? It was a trap. Refuse and look possessive. Accept and look weak. It's fine, Ethan said, even though it wasn't. I need a drink anyway. Beaumont's He stepped back, watching as Damien's hand replaced his on Vivian's waist. Her entire body went rigid, her expression closing off into that corporate ice. Ethan walked to the bar, ordered something stronger than champagne, and tried not to watch them dance. He failed. Damien was talking to her, his mouth close to her ear. Vivian's responses were clipped, her body language screaming discomfort. Other couples gave them a wide berth, as if sensing the tension. Quite a pair, aren't they? Vivian's father had materialized beside Ethan. Richard Sterling looked like an older, harder version of his daughter. Same sharp features, same calculating eyes. I suppose, Ethan said carefully, Damien's a good man. Successful, strategic, from an excellent family. Exactly the kind of partner Vivian needs. She doesn't seem to agree. My daughter has always been stubborn. She thinks she knows what's best for her, but she's too young to understand how the world really works. Richard sipped his scotch. Tell me, Mr. Walker, what are your intentions toward my daughter? The directness of the question nearly made Ethan choke on his drink. I care about her, he said, which was technically true even if the context was all wrong. Care. That's a conveniently vague word. Richard's gaze was piercing. Do you love her or oh? Ethan's mouth went dry. This was the moment. The test. The question that would determine whether this entire fiction held together or collapsed. He thought about Vivian helping Lily with homework, the way she'd looked on his couch drinking cheap wine, the vulnerability in her eyes when she'd asked if money was the only reason he was doing this. Yes, he said, I do. The lie came out steady and sure, and the terrifying thing was that part of him wondered if it was actually a lie at all. Richard studied him for a long moment. We'll see, he said finally. Actions matter more than words, Mr. Walker. Remember that. He walked away, leaving Ethan feeling like he'd just barely survived an interrogation. On the dance floor, Vivian extracted herself from Damien with visible relief. She came back to Ethan's side, her hand immediately finding his. What did my father want? She asked quietly. To threaten me, I think. Or test me. Possibly both. Welcome to the family. Her voice was dry, but her hand squeezed his. Can we leave now? I've done my required socializing. Please. They made their excuses and escaped into the cold January night. The hotel's parking garage was mostly empty, their breath fogging in the frigid air. That was exhausting, Vivian said. Your father asked me if I loved you. She stopped walking. What did you say? I said yes. It seemed like the right answer. Was it a lie? The question hung between them like a live wire. I don't know, Ethan said honestly. This whole thing is so messed up, Vivian. I don't know what's real anymore. Neither do I. She looked at him, and in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the parking garage, she looked younger, uncertain. But I know I don't want to do this without you. The lying, the performing, all of it. It's bearable because you're there. That's probably not a good sign. No, it's probably not. They stood there in the cold, looking at each other, both of them aware that something had shifted, but neither knowing what to do about it. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from his mother. Lily's asking when she can see Vivian again. She really liked her. He showed Vivian the message. She smiled, something soft and genuine. Tell her soon, Vivian said. I liked her too. The car arrived to take them home. They rode in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. When they reached Ethan's building, Vivian didn't immediately tell the driver to leave. I have a board meeting next week, she said. Damien's going to push for the merger vote. I need you there. At a board meeting? As moral support. Partners can observe if they're invited by a board member. I'm inviting you. Vivian, I don't think... Please. Her voice was quiet. I need someone in that room who's on my side. Just this once. How could he say no to that? Okay, he said. I'll be there. She smiled, and it transformed her face. Thank you. He climbed out of the car and watched it pull away, already dreading what next week would bring. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in Sterling Capital's main conference room on the 55th floor. Ethan spent the 3 days leading up to it fighting the urge to fake his own death and flee to Canada. "You're being dramatic," Vivian said when he mentioned this on Tuesday evening. They were in her office, going over the merger documents she'd managed to obtain through back channels. "You're just observing. You don't have to say anything. I'm going to be sitting in a room with some of the most powerful people in Chicago while they discuss a multi-billion-dollar deal. That's not dramatic. That's terrifying. You've handled worse." She pushed a stack of papers across her desk. "Read these tonight. I need you to understand what Damien's actually proposing." Ethan took the documents home and stayed up until 2 in the morning trying to parse the legal language. The merger agreement was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation. On the surface, it looked like a standard consolidation, Cross Industries and Sterling Capital combining resources, expanding market reach, the usual justifications. But buried in the fine print were clauses that would effectively strip Vivian of control. Her voting rights would be restructured into an advisory capacity. Major decisions would require approval from a new executive committee that Damien would chair. Even her title as CEO would become ceremonial after the first year. It was a corporate coup dressed up as a partnership. Ethan texted Vivian at 2:30 in the morning. "This is insane. How is your board even considering this?" Her response came immediately, like she'd been awake too. "Because Damien convinced them it's the only way to compete with the coastal firms. And because my father wants to retire knowing someone strong is running things." "You're strong. I'm a woman. That's different." The bitterness in those 3 words made Ethan's chest ache. Thursday arrived with the inevitability of a root canal. Ethan wore one of his new suits and tried to look like he belonged in the elevator that required a special key card to access the 55th floor. The receptionist gave him a visitor badge and directed him to the conference room with the kind of polite suspicion reserved for people who clearly didn't belong. The conference room was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a table that could seat 30 people, chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent. 15 board members were already seated, with Vivian at the head of the table and her father directly across from her. Damien sat 3 seats down, looking relaxed and confident. Vivian had saved a seat in the corner for Ethan, technically in the room, but clearly marked as observer status. He slid into it as quietly as possible, trying to become invisible. "Now that everyone's arrived," Richard Sterling said, glancing pointedly at Ethan, "let's begin. Damien, you have the floor. Sit." Damien stood, moving to the front of the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd already won. He had a presentation queued up on the massive screen, all clean graphics and carefully massaged numbers. "Thank you, Richard. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm proposing today is not just a merger. It's a revolution in how we approach commercial investment." He clicked to the first slide. Cross Industries and Sterling Capital together would control 42% of the Midwest commercial real estate market. Our combined client base would exceed $500 billion in managed assets. We'd be untouchable. One of the board members, an older woman named Margaret Chen, leaned forward. "The numbers are impressive, Damien, but your proposal includes significant restructuring of our executive leadership. Can you explain the rationale?" Of course, Sterling Capital is an excellent company with a strong legacy, but it's been operating with the same leadership structure for 30 years. The market has changed. Our competitors have changed. We need leadership that understands modern aggressive growth strategies, not conservative wealth preservation. He smiled at Vivian. "No offense to our current CEO. Of course, Vivian's done admirable work. But this merger requires someone with experience in hostile acquisitions and rapid market expansion." "Someone like you," Vivian said flatly. "Someone like me," Damien agreed. "I've doubled Cross Industries' value in 5 years through strategic aggression. That's what this merger needs." "Strategic aggression," Vivian repeated. "Is that what you call the SEC investigation into your last 3 acquisitions?" The room went silent. Damien's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "Those investigations were resolved. No wrongdoing was found." "Because you settled before they could complete their findings. There's a difference." Vivian stood, moving to her own position at the front of the room. "You want to talk about aggressive growth? Let's talk about Cross Industries' actual performance. Your revenue is up? Yes. But your client retention rate is down 18% over the same period. You're churning through clients because your aggressive strategies are costing them money. She clicked to her own presentation, and suddenly the screen filled with data that clearly hadn't come from public sources. Client lists, internal memos, financial projections that made several board members sit up straighter. Where did you get that? Damien's voice was sharp. I have my sources, just like you apparently have yours, given how much you know about Sterling Capital's internal operations. Vivian turned to the board. This merger isn't about growth. It's about Damien acquiring our client base and our reputation to cover for the fact that Cross Industries is hemorrhaging credibility. He needs us more than we need him. That's a serious accusation, Richard said. It's a fact. Look at the data. Damien's composure was cracking. This is absurd. You're so threatened by the idea of working with me that you're fabricating concerns. I'm not fabricating anything. These are your own numbers. Vivian's voice was ice. You want this board to hand you control of a company my family built for 3 generations so you can strip it for parts and add the pieces to your struggling empire. I'm not going to let that happen. You don't have the votes to stop it, Damien said. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. Damien had done his homework. He knew exactly how the votes would break. Vivian's father cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion until next month. Give everyone time to review the additional information Vivian has provided. With respect, Richard, I don't think delay serves anyone's interests. Damien had recovered his composure. The market waits for no one. We need to move forward with this merger now, or we risk losing our competitive advantage. What competitive advantage? Vivian shot back. We're the most successful commercial investment firm in the Midwest. We don't need your help to stay competitive. You need our help to stay solvent. Vivian. Her father's voice carried a warning. No, Dad. I'm tired of pretending this is about anything other than control. Damien wants to control Sterling Capital. You want someone to control me, but I'm not giving up this company to either of you. Margaret Chen spoke up. Vivian, your passion is admirable, but passion doesn't run a company. We need to think strategically about our long-term positioning. I am thinking strategically. That's why I'm saying no to a merger that would destroy everything we've built. The argument continued for another hour. Board members weighed in on both sides, some swayed by Vivian's data, others clearly already committed to Damien's proposal. Ethan watched from his corner, feeling useless. This wasn't something he could help with. This was corporate warfare, and he was just a spectator. But he noticed something the others seemed to miss. Every time Damien referenced a specific Sterling Capital contract or client relationship, he cited information that should have been confidential, not just generally known within the company, but actually restricted to executive-level access. Ethan pulled out his phone and started taking notes. Contract numbers, client names, dates, all the details Damien casually dropped into his arguments. Then he started cross-referencing them against his own work. He'd reviewed several of those contracts over the past year as part of his analyst duties. Something wasn't adding up. The meeting finally ended without a vote, postponed until next month as Richard had suggested. But the damage was done. The board was split, and Damien knew it. As people filed out, Damien stopped beside Vivian. This isn't over. No, it's not. Vivian's voice was steady, but Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Damien glanced at Ethan, still sitting in the corner with his phone. Still bringing your pet analyst to executive meetings? That's an interesting choice. Ethan is here because I invited him. Unlike you, he doesn't need to manipulate his way into rooms he doesn't belong in. Damien's smile was sharp. We'll see who belongs where after next month's vote. He left. The conference room emptied until it was just Ethan and Vivian, standing in the middle of all that glass and expensive furniture. I'm sorry you had to watch that, Vivian said quietly. Don't apologize. That was... Ethan searched for words. You were incredible. The way you stood up to him, the data you had, it won't be enough. My father's going to vote with Damien. I can see it in his eyes. He thinks I'm being emotional and irrational. You're not. I know I'm not, but that doesn't matter if I don't have the votes. She sat down in one of the chairs, suddenly looking smaller. I'm going to lose my company, Ethan. Everything my family built, everything I've worked for. It's all going to Damien Cross because my father thinks I need a man to save me. Ethan moved to the seat beside her. What if we could prove Damien's been accessing confidential information illegally? Vivian looked at him. What? He knew things today. Specific contract details, client information, stuff that's above even most executive-level clearance. Ethan showed her his notes. I've worked on some of these files. They're restricted access. The only way Damien should know this information is if someone gave it to him or if he hacked into your systems. Something shifted in Vivian's expression, a spark of hope cutting through the exhaustion. If we could prove he's been stealing proprietary information, that would void the merger agreement. The board would never support someone who'd been conducting corporate espionage. Can you check your access logs? See who's been looking at these specific files? I can do better than that. I can have our IT security team run a full audit. She stood, energy returning. If Damien's been accessing our systems without authorization, there will be traces. Digital fingerprints. What if he covered his tracks? Yeah. Then we look for whoever's been helping him, because there's no way he did this alone. Someone inside Sterling Capital has been feeding him information. Her jaw tightened, and when I find out who, they're going to wish they'd never heard of this company. They spent the next 3 days buried in digital forensics. Vivian brought in Sterling Capital's head of IT security, a woman named Rachel Park, who looked like she could hack the Pentagon before lunch. Rachel ran audits on every file Damien had referenced in the board meeting, tracking access logs and digital signatures. The results were damning. Someone's been systematically accessing restricted files for the past 4 months, Rachel explained, showing them screens full of code that made Ethan's head hurt. But they've been routing through multiple proxy servers and using stolen credentials to cover their tracks. Can you trace it back to the source? Vivian asked. I'm trying, but whoever did this knows what they're doing. They're using enterprise-level security protocols. Rachel highlighted a section of code. However, they made one mistake. They used the same proxy server sequence every time. It's like a signature. I can't tell you who they are yet, but I can tell you what else they've accessed. She pulled up another screen. Ethan felt his stomach drop. The stolen credentials belonged to him. That's my login, he said. My employee ID, my access codes. Vivian turned to him, her face pale. When's the last time you logged into these files? I haven't. Those are executive-level contracts. I don't have clearance for most of them. But someone's been using your credentials to access them. Rachel tapped the screen. Starting 4 months ago, hundreds of files. All the confidential information Damien referenced in that board meeting. But the implications hit Ethan like a freight train. They're framing me. Not just framing you, Vivian said quietly. They're making it look like you've been feeding information to Damien, like you're working for him. That's insane. Why would I? He stopped. The answer was obvious. Because I'm your boyfriend. If the board thinks I'm a corporate spy, they'll question your judgment. They'll use it as more evidence that you're not capable of running the company. It's smart, Rachel admitted. Diabolical, but smart. Discredit both of you with one move. Vivian's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, visibly forcing herself to stay calm. Can you prove Ethan didn't do this? I can prove his credentials were stolen, but that's not the same thing. A good lawyer could argue he gave them away voluntarily. Rachel looked apologetic. I can keep digging, but right now the evidence points to Ethan as the leak. Then we dig deeper, Vivian said. Because someone inside this company is working for Damien, and I'm going to find out who. The next week was a nightmare. Ethan kept working his regular job while simultaneously watching his back for whoever had stolen his credentials. Every interaction with colleagues felt suspicious. Every email could be monitored. He started keeping a log of his computer activity, documenting everything he accessed in case he needed to prove his innocence later. Vivian threw herself into the investigation with manic intensity. She brought in outside forensic accountants and cybersecurity experts, all working under strict confidentiality agreements. The board meeting was 3 weeks away and they were running out of time. Meanwhile, the fake relationship continued. Ethan attended dinners with Vivian's parents, smiled for photos at charity events, maintained the fiction that everything was fine. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting, pretending to be a devoted boyfriend while being accused of corporate espionage, lying about being in love while actually maybe falling in love, performing happiness while watching Vivian's world collapse around her. One night, after a particularly brutal session reviewing access logs, Vivian broke down. They were in her office at 11 p.m., surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. Rachel had just left after delivering more bad news. They still couldn't identify the actual source of the leak. The digital trail went cold at a series of international proxy servers that would take months to untangle. "We're not going to find them in time," Vivian said. Her voice was flat, defeated. "Damien's going to win. The board's going to vote for the merger. And everyone's going to think I'm too incompetent to notice my own boyfriend was spying on me. I wasn't spying. I know that. You know that. But can we prove it?" She laughed, a bitter sound. "The irony is that this whole fake relationship was supposed to protect me. Instead, it's going to be what destroys me." Ethan moved around the desk, crouching beside her chair so they were at eye level. "We still have 3 weeks. That's enough time to find something." "Is it? Because right now, all we have is circumstantial evidence that someone stole your credentials. That's not enough to stop the merger or clear your name. Then we find whoever's helping Damien. Someone inside Sterling Capital with executive access and a reason to want you gone. Bishtum. That could be half the company. I haven't exactly won any popularity contests." "Stop it." His voice came out sharper than intended. "Stop talking about yourself like you're the problem. You're brilliant and honest, and you actually care about this company. The only reason people are against you is because you won't play their games." Vivian looked at him, something raw in her expression. "Why are you still here, Ethan?" What? "You got your money. The contract's been executed. Your mother's medical bills are paid off. Lily's trust fund is established. You could walk away right now and keep everything. The contract says I stay until the merger vote. Forget the contract. Why are you still here? Why are you spending every night in my office going through logs that make your eyes bleed? Why do you stand beside me at events where people treat you like you're not good enough? Why do you keep defending me when it would be so much easier to just let this whole thing collapse?" The question hung in the air between them. Ethan realized he was still crouching beside her chair, close enough to see the exhaustion in her eyes, the vulnerability she only showed when the corporate mask finally cracked. "Because I care about you, guys," he said. The truth came out simple and undeniable. Not the CEO, not the company. You. "And I'm not going to walk away while you're fighting for your life. That's not what we agreed to." "No, it's not." He stood, putting distance between them because staying that close was dangerous. "But somewhere between fake dinners and board meetings and watching you help my daughter with math homework, this stopped being just a transaction, at least for me." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "For me too, what?" The admission shifted something fundamental. They'd been dancing around this truth for weeks, both pretending the fake relationship was still just performance. But now it was out in the open, impossible to ignore. "This is a terrible idea," Vivian said. "Probably the worst. We have completely different lives, different worlds. This can't work." "You're right. So why does it feel like the only real thing in my life right now?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He crossed back to her, and this time when he reached for her hand, it wasn't for show. It was just because he wanted to. "We should get out of here," he said. "Get some sleep. Come back with fresh eyes tomorrow." "I don't want to go home. That townhouse doesn't feel like home. It feels like a museum." "Then come to my place. The couch is uncomfortable and the neighborhood's sketchy, but at least it's real." Vivian looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. They took a cab to Ethan's apartment. It was close to midnight when they arrived. His mother had taken Lily to a friend's house for a sleepover, so the apartment was empty and quiet. Vivian stood in his small living room, looking around at the secondhand furniture and the crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. "This is nice," she said. "It's a mess." "No, it's lived in. There's a difference." She picked up one of Lily's drawings from the coffee table, a crayon portrait of Ethan with exaggerated hair and a huge smile. "She's talented. She's 7, Everything looks like abstract art at that age. Still, you can tell she's happy. Vivian set the drawing down carefully. You're a good father. I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm failing. That's how you know you're doing it right. Bad parents never question themselves. They ended up sitting on the couch with mugs of tea that Ethan had no memory of buying. Probably his mother's contribution to his barely stocked kitchen. Vivian had taken off her shoes and tucked her feet under her, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. Tell me something real, she said. Something that has nothing to do with Sterling Capital or mergers or any of this mess. Untrue, but trust. Ethan thought about it. Lily wants a dog. She's been asking for one for 2 years. I keep telling her we can't afford it, and our apartment doesn't allow pets. But really, I'm just terrified I'll screw it up. Like I'll forget to feed it or accidentally kill it somehow, and then I'll have to explain to my daughter why her dog died because her dad's an idiot. Vivian laughed, and it was real laughter, not the polite sound she made at corporate events. That's probably the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years. Your turn. Something real. She was quiet for a moment. I used to want to be a teacher. Before business school, before Sterling Capital, back when I thought I could choose my own path. I wanted to teach high school English, maybe coach debate team. She smiled sadly. My father laughed when I told him, said I was too smart to waste my life on a teacher's salary. So I went to Wharton and learned how to manage money instead of how to help kids understand Shakespeare. You could still do it. After all this is over. Could I? Or am I too deep in this world to ever get out? She looked at him. How do you do it? Stay grounded? Remember what matters? Lily helps. Hard to get too full of yourself when you're cleaning up spilled juice and untangling Barbie hair. He paused. And I guess I never had the option to forget what matters. When you're worried about making rent, you don't lose sight of priorities. I envy that sometimes, the clarity of it. Trust me, poverty doesn't give you clarity. It just gives you anxiety and insomnia. They talked until 2 a.m, trading stories that had nothing to do with corporate warfare or fake relationships. Vivian told him about the year she'd spent studying abroad in London, the freedom of being anonymous in a city where nobody knew her name. Ethan told her about the time he'd tried to fix Lily's bike and ended up making it worse, and how they'd walked it to a repair shop together, while Lily explained in great detail why daddies shouldn't be trusted with tools. Eventually, Vivian fell asleep on his couch, still holding her empty mug. Ethan covered her with a blanket and took the mug to the kitchen. He stood there for a moment, looking at this powerful CEO curled up on his secondhand furniture, and felt something in his chest crack open. This was real. Whatever had started as a transaction had become something else entirely, something that terrified him and pulled at him in equal measure. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Found something. Call me as soon as you're awake. Ethan glanced at the clock. 2:15 in the morning qualified as awake in his book. He called. I think I found your leak, Rachel said without preamble. But you're not going to like it. Tell me. The proxy servers all route back through a single IP address. It took some creative tracing, but I finally broke through the encryption. The access point is inside Sterling Capital, executive floor, and the timing matches up with someone who has a key card for after-hours access. Who? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Thomas Brennan, senior partner. He's been on the board for 15 years. Ethan's stomach dropped. Thomas Brennan was one of the oldest members of the Sterling Capital board. He'd known Vivian since she was a child. He'd voted to make her CEO 5 years ago. Are you sure? The digital evidence is solid. He's been accessing restricted files using stolen credentials, mostly yours, but also a few other analysts, and routing the information through offshore servers before sending it to an email account registered to a shell corporation owned by Cross Industries. Why would he do this? He's been with Sterling Capital forever. Money, probably, or a promise of a position after the merger goes through. Or maybe he just thinks Damien would be better for the company. Does the reason matter? It didn't, Ethan supposed. The betrayal was the same, regardless of motivation. Send me everything you have, he said. We need to show this to Vivian first thing tomorrow. Already done. Check your email. Rachel paused. Ethan, be careful. If Thomas realizes you're onto him, this could get ugly. These people don't play fair. Yeah, I'm learning that. He hung up and stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone. The evidence Rachel had compiled was devastating. Access logs, IP addresses, email trails showing communication between Thomas and Damien going back 6 months. It was enough to destroy Thomas's career and potentially expose Damien to criminal charges for corporate espionage. It was also enough to save Sterling Capital and clear Ethan's name. Vivian woke up around 6, disoriented and embarrassed to find herself on Ethan's couch. I'm sorry, she said, finger-combing her hair. I didn't mean to crash here. Don't apologize, but we need to talk. Rachel found something. He showed her the evidence on his laptop, watched as her expression shifted from confusion to shock to cold fury. Thomas, she said quietly, he was at my father's birthday party last month. He made a toast about loyalty and legacy and how proud he was of our family. I'm sorry. Boardroom shut it. Don't be. I should have seen this coming. Damien's too smart to do this alone. He needed someone inside. She closed the laptop. We have to move fast. If Thomas suspects we're onto him, he could destroy evidence or warn Damien. What's the play? We confront him, today, before he has a chance to prepare. She pulled out her phone and started typing. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Thomas will have to attend or it will look suspicious. Are you going to tell your father first? Vivian hesitated. No. If I tell my father, he might warn Thomas out of some misguided sense of friendship. We do this clean. Present the evidence to the entire board at once. The emergency board meeting convened at 3 p.m. Ethan sat in his usual corner, trying to look invisible while his heart hammered against his ribs. Thomas Brennan looked annoyed to be called in on short notice, but not particularly worried. He probably assumed this was just another argument about the merger. Vivian stood at the head of the table, Rachel beside her with a laptop. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Vivian said. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. I've called this meeting because I've discovered evidence of corporate espionage. That got everyone's attention. Board members sat up straighter. Richard Sterling's expression went carefully neutral. Over the past 4 months, Vivian continued, someone has been systematically accessing confidential Sterling Capital files and providing that information to Damien Cross. The stolen data includes client contracts, financial projections, and strategic plans. All information that Damien has used to strengthen his merger proposal. That's a serious accusation, Margaret Chen said. Do you have proof? Rachel, if you would, eat. Rachel pulled up her presentation, walking the board through the digital evidence. Access logs showing unauthorized entry into restricted files. IP addresses traced back to Sterling Capital's network. Email trails connecting to cross industries. The case built itself piece by methodical piece. Thomas's face had gone pale. The access points all route back to one individual, Vivian said. Someone with executive clearance and after-hours access to our systems. Someone who's been with this company long enough to know exactly which information would be most valuable to a competitor. She pulled up the final slide. It showed Thomas's name, his employee ID, and a timeline of his unauthorized accesses. Thomas Brennan has been selling Sterling Capital's secrets to Damien Cross for 6 months. The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd. You're fabricating evidence because you're desperate to stop the merger. We have your emails, Thomas. Vivian's voice cut like a blade. Correspondence with Damien discussing payment structures and information transfers. We have the shell corporation he set up to funnel money to you. We have your digital fingerprints on every single stolen file. Vivian, Richard's voice was strained. Don't, Dad. Don't try to defend him. She turned to Thomas. You've been with this company for 15 years. You knew my grandfather. You voted to make me CEO, and all the while you were waiting for someone like Damien to come along so you could sell us out. Thomas's composure cracked. You want to know why? Because your father is too sentimental to do what needs to be done. Because you're too idealistic to understand that business isn't about legacy, it's about profit. Damien understands that. He was willing to pay for information that would help him acquire a valuable asset. That's just good business. That's corporate espionage. It's also a felony. Vivian's voice was ice. You're fired, Thomas. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. And you should probably get a lawyer because I'm turning all of this evidence over to the FBI. Thomas opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked around the table, seeing no sympathy in any of the faces watching him. Even Richard Sterling looked disgusted. You're making a mistake, Thomas said. Damien's going to destroy you regardless. Get out of my building. Security appeared at the door. Vivian must have arranged for them to be standing by. They escorted Thomas out while the remaining board members sat in shocked silence. Vivian remained standing, though Ethan could see her hands trembling slightly. The merger proposal is based on illegally obtained information, she said, which means every argument Damien made in his presentation is tainted. I'm formally requesting that the board reject the merger on the grounds that it was negotiated in bad faith. Seconded, Margaret Chen said immediately. The vote was unanimous. Ethan watched Vivian's face as the reality sank in. She'd won. Sterling Capital was safe. But there was no triumph in her expression, just exhaustion and something that looked like grief. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some stopping to quietly apologize to Vivian, others simply leaving without comment. Richard lingered, clearly wanting to say something, but Vivian turned away. I need to make some calls, she said. Ethan, could you wait for me? He nodded. She disappeared into her office. Richard approached Ethan, his expression unreadable. You knew about this, he said. The investigation? The evidence? You were helping her. Yes, sir. Thomas was my friend. I've known him for 20 years. I'm sorry. Richard studied him for a long moment. No, I'm sorry. I should have trusted my daughter's judgment instead of listening to men who told me what I wanted to hear. He paused. You're good for her. She's more herself around you than I've seen in years. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Just don't break her heart. She's had enough of that. He left. Ethan sat in the empty conference room, staring out at Lake Michigan and trying to process everything that had just happened. Vivian emerged from her office an hour later, looking wrung out. I called the FBI, she said. They're opening an investigation. I also called Damien and informed him that the merger is dead. And if he tries to retaliate, I'll make sure every detail of Thomas's cooperation becomes public record. How'd he take it? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of threats and implications that this isn't over. She sat down heavily in the chair beside him. But it is over. Sterling Capital is safe. My position is secure. The crisis is resolved. There was something strange in her voice. It took Ethan a moment to identify it as loss. You're thinking about the contract, he said. 8 weeks. That's what we agreed to. The merger vote was supposed to be the end of it. She looked at him. We don't need to keep pretending anymore. Right. We can stage a breakup. Tell people it didn't work out. Go back to our separate lives. That was the deal. They sat there in the dimming afternoon light, both of them aware that something precious was slipping away and neither knowing how to hold on to it. What if we didn't? Ethan said quietly. Vivian turned to him. What? What if we didn't break up? What if we just kept going? Not for your parents or the board or to stop a merger, just because we want to. Ethan, that's insane. We're from completely different worlds. You have your daughter and your life. I have the company and all the obligations that come with it. How would that even work? I don't know, but I know I don't want to walk away from you. He reached for her hand. This started as a lie, but it became real somewhere along the way. At least for me. For me too, she whispered. But real doesn't mean possible. Why not? Who says it's impossible? Besides everyone else, I mean. Why should we care what they think? Vivian laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. Because they're right. Because I can't ask you to live in my world. And I can't abandon my responsibilities to live in yours. Because eventually the reality of our different lives would crush whatever this is between us. You don't know that. I do. I've seen it happen. My world destroys people like you, Ethan. It would turn you cynical and bitter, or it would turn me into someone who resents you for being a reminder of everything I can't have. Either way, we'd end up hating each other. I could never hate you. Not now, but 6 months from now? A year from now? When you're tired of attending events where people look down on you? When Lily's asking why you're never home? When my father starts pressuring us about marriage and children and legacy? She pulled her hand away. This was beautiful while it lasted, but it has to end before it turns into something ugly. Ethan felt something crumbling inside his chest. She was right. He knew she was right. But that didn't make it hurt any less. When? He asked. Now. While we still care about each other enough to be kind. She stood, wiping her eyes. I'll have my lawyer draw up the breakup story, something dignified. Mutual decision. Different priorities. We'll always care about each other, but it's better this way. The usual script. And then what? Then you go back to your life. I'll make sure you get that promotion you deserve. Director level. It comes with a significant raise, and the money from the contract is yours regardless. I don't want your money. Too bad. It's already transferred. Use it to take Lily on that vacation she's been asking about. Buy a dog. Move to a better neighborhood. Live your life, Ethan. She walked to the door, then stopped without turning around. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. For helping me save my company. For reminding me what it feels like to be seen as something other than a CEO. For making me believe, even for a little while, that I could have something real. Then she was gone, and Ethan was alone in the conference room with the Chicago skyline glittering outside the windows like a city made of broken glass. Ethan walked out of Sterling Capital at 6 p.m. and didn't go back for 3 days. He called in sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. His chest felt hollow, and every breath hurt in a way that had nothing to do with physical illness. His mother noticed immediately. What happened? She asked on the first morning, finding him staring at his coffee like it held answers. Nothing, work stuff. You're a terrible liar. She sat down across from him. Is this about that woman? Vivian? Ethan's head snapped up. How did you... I'm your mother. You think I don't notice when you start dressing better and coming home late? When you smile at your phone like it's telling you secrets? She reached across the table and took his hand. What happened? It's over. That's what happened. Did you love her? The question caught him off guard. He'd been so busy telling himself this was fake, a transaction, a performance, that he'd never let himself put that word to what he felt. I don't know, he said. Maybe. Does it matter? Of course it matters. Love always matters. Not when it's impossible. His mother squeezed his hand. Nothing's impossible, just difficult. There's a difference. But she didn't understand. She didn't know about the contract or the fake relationship or the completely different worlds that made the idea of him and Vivian ridiculous. She just saw her son hurting and wanted to fix it, the way mothers do. Lily was less subtle. Why doesn't Vivian come over anymore? She asked on the second evening, looking up from her homework with those too perceptive 7-year-old eyes. She's busy with work. Is she still your girlfriend? Ethan's throat closed up. No, sweetheart. That's over. Why? Sometimes things just don't work out. But you were happy when she was here. You smiled more. Lily's voice got smaller. Did I do something wrong? Is that why she stopped coming? My thought she's chose. No. Ethan pulled her into a hug. You didn't do anything wrong. This has nothing to do with you. Then why? He didn't have an answer she'd understand. How could he explain that sometimes caring about someone isn't enough? That the gap between two lives can be too wide to bridge, even with the best intentions? On the third day, Ethan forced himself back to work. The promotion Vivian had mentioned was already in effect. His new title and salary had appeared in the system like magic. Director of Commercial Analysis. A 30% raise. An office instead of a cubicle, though calling it an office was generous. It was barely bigger than a closet, but it had a door and a window. Marcus found him unpacking boxes of files that afternoon. Congratulations on the promotion, Marcus said, though the timing's interesting. What do you mean? Come on, man. Everyone knows you were dating the CEO. Now you're suddenly a director? People are talking. Ethan's hand stilled on the box he was unpacking. Let them talk. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, be careful. Office politics are brutal. And you've got a target on your back now. Ike? Boy. Marcus wasn't wrong. Ethan could feel it in the break room, conversations that stopped when he entered, sideways glances from colleagues who'd been friendly before. The promotion marked him as someone who'd slept his way to success, regardless of the actual quality of his work. The irony would have been funny if it didn't make him want to punch something. Vivian, meanwhile, seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Ethan caught glimpses of her in the executive hallway, always surrounded by assistants or board members, always moving too fast to stop. Once their eyes met across the lobby. She looked away first, and Ethan felt that hollow space in his chest crack wider. The official breakup announcement came out a week later. A brief statement from Sterling Capital's PR department. Vivian Sterling and Ethan Walker have mutually decided to end their relationship. Both parties wish each other well and ask for privacy during this time. The statement was professional, dignified, and completely bloodless. It reduced 2 months of whatever they'd had to a single paragraph that meant nothing. Ethan's phone exploded with messages from colleagues offering sympathy or fishing for gossip. He ignored all of them except one from Rachel Park. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I think she's miserable too. That should have made him feel better. It didn't. 2 weeks after the breakup, Damian Cross showed up at Sterling Capital. Ethan was in his office reviewing a portfolio when his assistant knocked. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Weird. Damian walked in like he owned the place. Expensive suit and shark smile, fully deployed. Mr. Walker, or should I say Director Walker, congratulations on the promotion. Ethan didn't stand. What do you want? Just a friendly conversation. Damian closed the door and sat down uninvited. I thought we should chat, given recent events. We have nothing to talk about. Oh, I think we do. You see, I'm a curious person, and I'm very curious about your relationship with Vivian Sterling. Damian leaned forward. It started rather suddenly, didn't it? Right around the time my merger proposal gained traction, and it ended just as quickly once the merger was dead. Ethan's blood went cold. What are you implying? Blood went cold. What? I'm not implying anything. I'm saying outright that your relationship was a fabrication designed to make Vivian look unavailable and emotionally stable. A strategic move to counter my courtship. His smile widened. Quite clever, actually. I'm almost impressed. You're wrong. Am I? Then explain the timeline. Explain why a senior analyst with no social connection to the CEO suddenly became her devoted boyfriend. Explain the contract. The word contract hit Ethan like a physical blow. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, I have sources inside Sterling Capital. Not Thomas Brennan. He was sloppy and got caught. But there are others. Others who know about the financial arrangement between you and Vivian. Damian pulled out his phone and showed Ethan a document. It was a photo of the contract Ethan had signed, complete with dollar amounts and dates. Where did you get that? Like I said, I have sources. The question is, what should I do with this information? Damian put his phone away. I could go public. Show everyone that Vivian Sterling is so desperate to maintain control that she literally hired a boyfriend. That would be devastating for her reputation. The board might start questioning her judgment all over again. What do you want? Smart boy. Getting to the point. Damian's smile turned predatory. I want you to testify that the relationship was fake. I'm putting together a case to have the merger vote reopened on the grounds that it was influenced by fraudulent information, namely Vivian's supposed relationship status. Your testimony would be very valuable. Go to hell. Think carefully before you refuse. I can make your life very difficult. That promotion? Gone. Your reputation? Destroyed. I could even make noise about the legality of your contract with Vivian. Pretty sure the SEC would be interested in what amounts to fraud. You're bluffing. Try me. Damian stood, smoothing his jacket. You have 48 hours to decide. Testify voluntarily, or I'll go public with the contract and drag you both through the mud. Your choice. He left. Ethan sat in his tiny office, staring at nothing, feeling the walls close in. He should tell Vivian. That was the obvious move. But they hadn't spoken in 2 weeks, and the thought of calling her now, of admitting that Damien had somehow obtained their contract, made his stomach turn. Instead, Ethan did something probably stupid. He called Rachel. "I need your help," he said when she answered. "Damien has a copy of the contract, the one between me and Vivian. He's threatening to go public unless I testify that the relationship was fake." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "How did he get it?" "He said he has sources inside Sterling Capital, someone with access to confidential files." "After we just caught Thomas? Someone else is feeding him information?" Rachel swore quietly. "Okay, don't do anything. Don't agree to testify. Don't talk to Damien again. I'm going to run another audit. If there's another leak, I'll find it. We have 48 hours. Then I'd better work fast." Ethan spent the next 2 days in a state of low-grade panic. He went through the motions at work, but his mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios that all ended badly. If Damien went public with the contract, Vivian's reputation would be destroyed. The board would lose confidence in her. Everything she'd fought for would collapse. But if Ethan testified, if he stood up in front of lawyers and board members and admitted the relationship was a transaction, it would hurt her just as much. Maybe worse, because it would be coming from him. There was no good option, just degrees of terrible. Rachel called him at 11 p.m. on the second night. "Found something, meet me at the office. Conference room B on 42. Ethan was there in 30 minutes. Rachel had 3 laptops open, screens full of code and access logs. Same pattern as before, she explained. Someone using stolen credentials to access confidential files. But this time they were specifically targeting legal documents and contracts, including yours." "Who?" "Jennifer Morrison. She's a senior associate in the legal department, been with Sterling Capital for 8 years. Ethan didn't recognize the name. Why would she do this? Money, probably. Or maybe Damien promised her a position at Cross Industries after the merger went through. Rachel pulled up a series of emails. She's been in contact with Damien for 3 months. Started right after Thomas was exposed. Damien needed a new inside source and Jennifer volunteered. Can we prove it? Already did. Digital trail is solid. She's been accessing files she had no business looking at and forwarding them to an encrypted email account that traces back to Damien's personal server. Rachel closed the laptops. Question is, what do we do with this information? We tell Vivian. She's going to fire Jennifer, probably prosecute her too. Good, she should. Ethan stood. Where is Vivian now? Probably home. It's almost midnight. I need her address. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, then wrote it down on a sticky note. Good luck. And Ethan? Whatever happened between you two, she's been miserable since it ended. I don't know if that helps, but I thought you should know. The drive to Vivian's townhouse took 20 minutes through empty Chicago streets. Ethan stood on her doorstep at 1:45, second-guessing this decision with every breath. But he pressed the doorbell anyway. Vivian answered in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked exhausted and young, and nothing like the CEO who terrified boardrooms. Ethan. Her voice was barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? Damien came to see me. He has our contract. He's threatening to go public unless I testify that our relationship was fake. Vivian's face went pale. How did he? Another leak. Jennifer Morrison from your legal department. Rachel caught her tonight. He handed her the sticky note with the evidence details. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? Because I need you to know that I'm not testifying. I don't care what Damien threatens or what he does with that contract. I'm not going to stand up in front of anyone and say what we had was fake. Ethan, if you don't testify, he'll release the contract anyway. Everyone will know I paid you. My reputation, to hell with your reputation. The words came out harder than he intended. I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending that's what matters. You want to know what matters? You matter. Not Sterling Capital, not the board, not what anyone thinks. You. Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You can't say things like that. Why not? It's true. I spent 2 weeks trying to convince myself that ending this was the right choice, that we're too different, that it could never work. And maybe you're right about all of that. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. You don't understand what you're asking. My world will eat you alive. Then let it try. I'm not afraid of your world, Vivian. I'm afraid of losing you. He stepped closer. I know this is insane. I know it's impractical and probably impossible, but I don't care. I want to try. If you'll let me. Vivian was crying now, tears running down her face unchecked. I can't ask you to do this. It's not fair to you or to Lily. Lily asked why you stopped coming over. She said I was happier when you were around. Ethan's voice cracked. She was right. I was happier. I am happier. Even with all the corporate warfare and the stress and Damien threatening to destroy both of us, I'm happier when you're in my life. This is crazy. Yeah, it is. He reached for her hand, but I'm done being sensible. Sensible got me nowhere except drowning in debt and working myself to death. Maybe it's time to be crazy instead. Vivian looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. If we do this, really do this, it's going to be hard. My family, the company, all the obligations and expectations. You'll hate it sometimes. You'll hate me sometimes. Probably. And you'll hate my tiny apartment and my terrible cooking and the fact that Lily will want to show you every single drawing she makes. I like her drawings. You say that now. Wait until you've seen 300 of them. Vivian laughed through her tears. You're serious about this. Completely serious. Totally insane, but serious. He squeezed her hand. So what do you say? Want to try being crazy with me? She didn't answer with words. She pulled him inside and kissed him, and it was nothing like the careful, performative kisses they'd shared at public events. This was real and desperate and tasted like tears and possibility. When they finally broke apart, Vivian was smiling. Okay, she said, let's be crazy. They spent the rest of the night at her kitchen table, drinking coffee and planning their next move. Jennifer Morrison would be dealt with in the morning, fired and prosecuted, just like Thomas Brennan. Damien's threat would be neutralized once they exposed his new source. But the contract was still out there, and Damien could still go public with it. Let him, Vivian said. If he releases it, we'll get ahead of the story. Issue a statement explaining that, yes, the relationship started as an arrangement, but it became real. People will judge us, but they were going to judge us anyway. You're bored? We'll have to deal with it. I'm not letting Damien control my life anymore. And I'm not letting fear of judgment dictate my decisions. She looked at Ethan. If we're doing this, we do it honestly. No more lies, no more performances. Just us, figuring it out as we go. Your father's going to have opinions. My father always has opinions. I've spent 30 years trying to live up to them. Maybe it's time I stop. They talked until dawn, working through logistics and fears and the 100 small details of trying to merge two completely different lives. It wouldn't be easy. Ethan would need to find childcare that worked with Vivian's unpredictable schedule. Vivian would need to accept that sometimes parent-teacher conferences took priority over board meetings. They'd both need to navigate the judgment from colleagues and family who couldn't understand why a billionaire CEO was dating a single-father analyst. But as the sun came up over Chicago, painting Vivian's kitchen in shades of gold, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. The confrontation with Jennifer Morrison happened at 9 a.m. Vivian called an emergency meeting in her office with Jennifer, Rachel, and the head of HR present. Ethan wasn't there, but Rachel filled him in later. Jennifer tried to deny it at first, Rachel said, but the evidence was overwhelming. She broke down after about 10 minutes and admitted everything. Damien had approached her after Thomas was caught, offered her twice her salary to feed him information. What happens now? She's fired, obviously, and Vivian's filing criminal charges. The FBI is already involved from the Thomas Brennan case, so they're just adding Jennifer to the investigation. Rachel grimaced. Damien's going to be dealing with federal prosecutors soon. Corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, the works. Good, Ma. Yeah, but he's not going down quietly. His lawyers issued a statement this morning. She showed Ethan her phone. He's claiming he's the victim of a vendetta from Vivian Sterling. who's so desperate to maintain power that she's making false accusations against innocent business partners. Ethan read the statement and felt his blood pressure rise. That's garbage. Of course it is, but it's going to get messy before it gets better. Rachel pocketed her phone. For what it's worth, I think you and Vivian are good together, even if half the office is gossiping about it. Only half? Okay, all of the office. But some of them mean well. Yes. The gossip was actually worse than Ethan expected. By noon, everyone at Sterling Capital seemed to know that he and Vivian were back together. The rumors ranged from surprisingly accurate to completely unhinged. His favorite was the one claiming Vivian had paid him $5 million to pretend to love her, which was both offensive and weirdly close to the truth. Marcus cornered him in the break room around 2. So you're back with the CEO? Yeah. After a very public breakup. Yeah. And you're just going to ignore everyone talking about you? Ethan poured himself coffee from the machine that still tasted like battery acid. Pretty much. That's either very brave or very stupid, boss. Probably both. Ethan turned to face Marcus. Look, I know what people are saying, that I'm using her for money and promotions, that she's having a crisis and I'm taking advantage. But the truth is, I care about her. A lot. And I'm tired of pretending I don't just because it makes other people uncomfortable. Marcus studied him for a moment, then smiled. Good for you, man. Seriously, life's too short to care what assholes think. That became Ethan's mantra for the next few weeks. Life's too short to care what assholes think. He repeated it every time someone made a pointed comment about his promotion, every time he caught colleagues whispering when he walked past, every time a client meeting got awkward because someone recognized him as that guy who's dating the CEO. Vivian dealt with her own share of judgment. The business press had picked up on their relationship, running profiles that ranged from mildly judgmental to actively hostile. One article called her emotionally unstable for dating an employee. Another implied she was having a midlife crisis at 30. The comment sections were predictably vicious. I made the mistake of reading the comments, Vivian admitted one evening. They were at Ethan's apartment, and she was helping Lily with math homework again while Ethan cooked dinner. Apparently, I'm either a predator taking advantage of a subordinate or a desperate spinster who can't find a real relationship. The internet is terrible, Ethan said from the kitchen. Stop reading comments. I know. I just can't help it sometimes. What does it say? Lily asked, looking up from her fractions worksheet. Nothing important, sweetheart. Just people being mean on the internet. My teacher says people who are mean on the internet are just unhappy with themselves. Lily said this with the certainty of a 7-year-old who'd received wisdom from on high. So you should feel sorry for them instead of sad. Vivian smiled. Your teacher's right. That's very wise. I know. I'm very smart. Lily went back to her fractions, completely missing the way Vivian's eyes got bright. Later, after Lily was in bed, Vivian and Ethan sat on his worn-out couch drinking wine. She's amazing, Vivian said quietly. Your daughter, you should be proud. I am, though I can't take much credit. She's just naturally better than me at being a person. That's not true. She's kind because you taught her to be kind. She's confident because you made her feel safe. Vivian leaned against his shoulder. You're a good father, Ethan. Vivian leaned against. Don't sell yourself short. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, Chicago hummed with its usual nighttime energy. Sirens in the distance. Neighbors arguing upstairs. The rattle of the L train a few blocks over. My father wants to meet with us, Vivian said eventually. Both of us. He called this morning. That sounds ominous. Probably. He's not happy about us getting back together. He thinks I'm making another impulsive decision. Are you? She pulled back to look at him. No. This is the least impulsive thing I've ever done. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want instead of what makes sense on paper. How's that feel? Terrifying, also kind of wonderful. The meeting with Richard Sterling happened on Saturday morning at a restaurant so expensive it didn't have prices on the menu. Ethan wore one of his good suits and still felt underdressed. Vivian's father was already seated when they arrived, reading the Wall Street Journal with reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as they approached, his expression carefully neutral. Vivian, Mr. Walker, Dad. Vivian sat down across from him, Ethan beside her. Thank you for meeting with us. I'm your father. Of course I'll meet with you. Richard folded his newspaper with precise movements. Though I'll admit I'm confused about what's happening. You broke up with Ethan 2 weeks ago. Now you're back together. The optics are concerning. I don't care about optics. Clearly. But as CEO of Sterling Capital, you should care. Your personal life reflects on the company. My personal life is my personal life, Vivian said firmly. I know you're not happy about this, but I need you to understand something. I love Ethan, not because he's convenient or strategic or checks boxes on some corporate marriage checklist, because he makes me happy, because he sees me as a person instead of an asset, because when I'm with him, I remember who I am underneath all the CEO expectations. Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You love him. Yes. And you, Mr. Walker? How do you feel about my daughter? Every eye in the restaurant seemed to be on them, though Ethan knew that was paranoia. Still, his mouth went dry. I love her, he said. I know I'm not what you wanted for Vivian. I know I don't have the right background or connections or whatever else you think she needs, but I care about her more than I've ever cared about anyone except my daughter. And I'm not going to apologize for that. Richard was quiet for a long moment. A waiter appeared to take their orders, then disappeared when Richard waved him away impatiently. When Vivian's mother and I got engaged, Richard said finally, my father told me I was making a mistake. She came from old money, but her family was on the decline. He said marrying her would be a liability, that I should find someone from a more stable financial background. Vivian looked surprised. You never told me that. Because it didn't matter. I loved your mother. I still love her, even though she drives me crazy half the time. And my father was wrong. Marrying her was the best decision I ever made. He looked at Ethan. I've been pushing you toward Damien Cross because I thought you needed someone strong, someone who could handle the pressure of running Sterling Capital and wouldn't be intimidated by your success. But I was wrong about what strength looks like. Dad, let me finish. Strength isn't about being ruthless or aggressive. It's about standing beside someone when the world is against them. It's about caring more about their happiness than your own comfort. Damien Cross is strong in the way a hammer is strong, good for breaking things, not building them. He turned to Ethan. You stood with my daughter when it would have been easier to walk away. You defended her against people who could destroy your career. That's real strength. Ethan didn't know what to say. Vivian's hand found his under the table, squeezing tight. I'm not saying this will be easy, Richard continued. People will judge you both. The press will be invasive. Board members will have opinions. But if you're committed to each other, truly committed, then you have my support. Thank you, Vivian said quietly. Don't thank me yet. I'm still going to have opinions about how you run the company. And Mr. Walker, Ethan, he corrected. Please, just call me Ethan. Ethan, if you hurt my daughter, I will make your life very unpleasant. That's not a threat, just a statement of fact. Understood. They had brunch. It was actually pleasant once the heavy conversation was over. Richard asked about Lily, and Ethan found himself telling stories about her school projects and her obsession with horses. Vivian watched him with a soft expression, and Ethan realized this was the first time he'd talked about his daughter with Vivian's family without feeling like he was being judged. As they were leaving, Richard pulled Ethan aside. One more thing, that promotion Vivian gave you, you earned it. I reviewed your work personally. Your analysis on the Morrison portfolio caught an error that would have cost us $3 million. You're good at your job regardless of who you're dating. Thank you, sir. Stop calling me sir, we're family now, apparently. He didn't sound entirely happy about it, but there was something warm in his eyes. Take care of her. I will. The resolution with Damien Cross took another 3 weeks. The FBI investigation revealed the full scope of his corporate espionage, not just at Sterling Capital, but at 2 other companies he'd been targeting for acquisition. The evidence was overwhelming, and his lawyers couldn't spin their way out of it. He took a plea deal in the end. 5 years probation, a massive fine, and a permanent ban from serving as an executive at any publicly traded company. Cross Industries collapsed without him, absorbed by competitors in a series of hostile takeovers that left Damien with nothing but legal bills and a destroyed reputation. Vivian didn't celebrate when she heard the news. She just looked tired. "I should feel vindicated," she said. They were in her office, and she was staring out at the Chicago skyline. "He tried to destroy me, and now he's the one who's destroyed. That should feel good." "But it doesn't," Ethan said. "No. It just feels sad. All that intelligence and ambition wasted because he couldn't stand the idea of someone else having power." She turned to face him. "I could have ended up like him. If I'd kept prioritizing control over everything else. If I'd kept pushing people away and treating relationships like transactions. But you didn't, because you wouldn't let me." She crossed to where he sat, sliding into his lap in a way that would have scandalized the entire executive floor if anyone saw. "You kept pushing back, kept being honest when I wanted comfortable lies, kept choosing me even when I gave you every reason to walk away. You make it sound like a sacrifice. It wasn't." "What was it then?" "It sounded like a—" Ethan thought about it. "It was the easiest hard choice I've ever made, if that makes sense." "It does." She kissed him, slow and soft. "I love you. I don't think I've actually said that clearly." "You haven't. I love you too." They stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, the Chicago skyline glittering behind them like a promise. The office gossip never really stopped, but it evolved. People got used to seeing Ethan and Vivian together in the building. The initial scandal faded into background noise as other dramas took center stage. Ethan got better at ignoring the whispers, and Vivian stopped reading comment sections. Life found a rhythm. Ethan worked his director position and discovered he was actually good at management. Vivian ran Sterling Capital with the same fierce intelligence, but she started delegating more, trusting her executives to handle things without her constant oversight. She had dinner at Ethan's apartment twice a week, helping Lily with homework and gradually filling the role of something more than Dad's girlfriend. 3 months after they got back together, Lily asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Is Vivian going to be my mom?" They were eating breakfast, just the two of them. But they were eating. Ethan's mother had taken an early dialysis appointment. "What makes you ask that?" "Emma's mom got remarried last year, and now Emma has 2 moms. I was thinking maybe if you and Vivian got married, I'd have a mom too." Lily said this casually, like she was discussing what to have for lunch. "I wouldn't call her mom, probably. That would be weird. But maybe something else." Ethan's chest felt tight. "Would you want that?" "Ethan's. Vivian being part of our family?" "Yeah, she's nice, and she's really smart. And she doesn't treat me like I'm stupid just because I'm a kid." Lily looked up from her cereal. "Do you want to marry her?" Ethan hadn't let himself think that far ahead. Marriage seemed like a distant possibility, something for much later when they'd figured out how to make this relationship work long term. But looking at his daughter, seeing the hope in her eyes, he realized the answer was simple. "Yeah," he said, "I do. Someday." "Yeah, yes, then you should ask her." "It's not that simple, sweetheart." "Why not? If you love her and she loves you and I like her, that's all that matters, right?" Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. Ethan thought about it for the rest of the day. Marriage. Making this permanent. Not just merging lives, but actually building something together. It was fast. Too fast by any conventional timeline. They'd only been really together for 3 months, and half of that had been fake. But nothing about their relationship had been conventional from the start. Why should this be different? That evening, Ethan called Vivian. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you about something." She arrived 20 minutes later looking worried. "Is everything okay? You sounded strange on the phone." "Everything's fine. Lily's at a friend's house for the evening. I wanted to talk to you without her listening." They sat on the couch. Vivian was still in her work clothes, though she'd ditched her shoes at the door. She looked at him with those storm-colored eyes, waiting. "Lily asked me this morning if you were going to be her mom," Ethan said. Vivian went very still. "What did you tell her, Wakikiu?" "That it's not that simple, but she made a good point. She said if we love each other and she likes you, that's all that matters." He took Vivian's hand. "And she's right. I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out, but I don't want to wait for the perfect moment or the right timeline. I want to build a life with you. If you want that too. Ethan, I'm not proposing. Not yet. I don't even have a ring. But I'm saying that's where I want this to go. I want you to be part of our family. Officially. Permanently. And I wanted you to know that before things go any further. Vivian's eyes were bright with tears. You're sure, because I come with a lot of baggage. The company, my parents, all the expectations and obligations. Being with me means dealing with all of that forever. I know, and I'm still sure. I've never been anyone's mother before. I don't know how to do that. Neither did I when Lily was born. We'll figure it out together. Vivian kissed him, hard and desperate, like she was trying to pour everything she felt into that connection. When they broke apart, she was crying and smiling at the same time. Yes, she said. Yes, I want that. All of it. You and Lily and whatever messy, complicated life we build together. Or mafagiki bot serits. Even if it means living in my tiny apartment while we figure out something bigger? Even then, though we should probably look for something with more than one bathroom eventually. They laughed, and it felt like a beginning. The ring Ethan eventually bought was nothing like what a billionaire CEO probably expected. He found it at a small jeweler in a neighborhood where rent was still affordable. A simple platinum band with a small diamond that caught the light without screaming for attention. It cost 2 months of his old salary, back before the promotion, and the jeweler wrapped it in a plain box that fit in Ethan's pocket without making an obvious bulge. He carried it around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Which was stupid because there was no right moment. Just moments, one after another, and the choice to make one of them matter. The moment that finally felt right happened on a Tuesday evening in April. Nothing special about the day except that it was ordinary in the best way. Vivian had come over after work, trading her CEO armor for jeans and one of Ethan's old sweaters that she'd basically claimed as her own. Lily was at the kitchen table making a diorama about the solar system, which mostly involved a lot of glitter and pipe cleaners that bore no resemblance to actual planets. Jupiter doesn't have a face, Vivian said gently, looking at Lily's googly-eyed construction. My Jupiter does. He's happy because he's the biggest planet. That's very creative. Ethan watched them from the kitchen, where he was attempting to make pasta without burning it. This was his life now. A brilliant CEO, helping his daughter craft scientifically inaccurate planets while he tried not to ruin dinner. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like what he'd imagined his life would look like. It was also the best thing that had ever happened to him. After dinner, after Lily's bath and bedtime story, and the complicated ritual of tucking in every stuffed animal just right, Ethan found Vivian on the couch scrolling through emails on her phone. You're working, he observed. Just checking in. One of our Singapore clients is worried about... She stopped when she saw his expression. I'm working. Sorry. Old habit. Put the phone down. Bossy. But she set it aside, giving him her full attention. What's up? Ethan's heart was hammering hard enough that he wondered if she could hear it. This was insane. They'd only been really together for 5 months. But then again, everything about them had been insane from the start. Why stop now? He pulled the box from his pocket and opened it before he could overthink it. Vivian's eyes went wide. Ethan, let me get this out before I lose my nerve. He stayed sitting because getting down on one knee felt too formal for them, too performative. I know this is fast. I know we still haven't figured out a lot of things, like where we're going to live or how to merge our completely different lives. I know people are still gossiping about us at work, and your board probably has opinions, and my mother keeps asking when we're going to have the wedding, even though I haven't actually proposed yet. Vivian was crying and laughing at the same time. Is this you proposing? I'm getting there. Stop interrupting. He took her hand. The point is, none of that matters. What matters is that when I think about my future, you're in it. When Lily talks about what she wants to be when she grows up, she assumes you'll be there to see it. You've become part of our family so completely that I can't remember what life looked like before you. Ethan, still not done. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I know you'll work too much sometimes. I know you'll get stressed about board meetings and probably forget to eat lunch half the time. I know I'll get frustrated when you cancel plans because of work emergencies, and you'll get frustrated when I'm too tired from parenting to go to fancy events. We're going to fight about stupid things and make mistakes and probably drive each other crazy. This is a terrible proposal, Vivian said, but she was smiling through her tears. It's an honest one, because here's the thing, I don't want perfect, I want real. I want messy Tuesday nights with glitter all over the kitchen. I want someone who helps my daughter understand that being smart and ambitious isn't something to apologize for. I want you, exactly as you are, forever. He paused. So Vivian Sterling, will you marry me? She looked at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. For a moment, Ethan's heart stopped because what if she said no? What if he'd misread everything? Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, you idiot, of course, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which felt like some kind of miracle given that he'd guessed her size. Vivian stared at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. It's not very big, Ethan said, suddenly self-conscious. It's perfect. It's us. She kissed him hard, her hands in his hair, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest. A sense of rightness that had nothing to do with logic or practicality, and everything to do with choosing the person you loved over all the reasons why it shouldn't work. They told Lily the next morning over breakfast. Ethan had worried about how to explain it, but Vivian just held up her left hand and said, "Your dad and I are getting married. Lily's face lit up like someone had plugged her into a power source. Really? Really? So you're going to be my family, like officially? If that's okay with you?" Vivian said. Lily launched herself out of her chair and wrapped her arms around Vivian's waist. "That's very okay with me." Watching his daughter hug his fiancée, the words still felt surreal. Ethan felt his eyes burn. His mother, who'd been quietly making coffee in the corner, came over and squeezed his shoulder. "You did good, son," she said quietly. "Your father would have liked her." Ethan's father had died when he was 12, too long ago for the memories to be anything but fragments. But he liked to think his mom was right. His dad would have approved of someone who made Lily laugh and didn't let Ethan get away with his self-deprecating nonsense. Telling Vivian's parents was predictably more complicated. They arranged a dinner at Richard and Catherine Sterling's house, the same place where this had all started with that disastrous fake boyfriend reveal. Sitting in that same dining room months later with an actual engagement to announce felt like closing some kind of circle. Richard took the news with his usual measured composure. "Congratulations. Have you set a date?" "Not yet," Vivian said. "We just got engaged yesterday." "And you're sure about this? Both of you?" "Dad," Vivian's voice carried a warning. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm asking a legitimate question. Marriage is a significant commitment, especially given your respective responsibilities." "We're sure," Ethan said firmly. "I love your daughter. I know I'm not what you imagined for her, but I promise I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she's happy." Catherine Sterling, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "That's all any parent wants, really, for their child to be happy." She looked at Vivian with something soft in her expression. "You are happy, aren't you? Truly?" "Yes, Mom, I really am." "Then that's enough for me." Catherine stood and moved around the table to hug Vivian, then surprised Ethan by hugging him too. "Welcome to the family, Ethan. Officially this time." Richard's blessing came more slowly, but it came. By the end of the evening, he was asking Ethan about his career plans and whether he'd considered moving into executive management, which Ethan took as acceptance even if it was wrapped in discussion about corporate advancement. The engagement announcement hit the business press like a bomb. The headlines ranged from supportive to scandalized, with most landing somewhere in the skeptical middle. Sterling Capital CEO to Mary Company Analyst was one of the gentler versions. The comment sections were predictably toxic, full of people who had opinions about their relationship despite knowing nothing about their actual lives. Ethan made the mistake of reading some of them. Gold digger, trophy husband. She's too smart to throw away her career for this. He's using her for money and status. The words stung even though he knew they were wrong. Vivian found him on the couch that evening, phone in hand, expression dark. "You're reading comments again. How did you know?" "Because I know that look. Give me your phone." "I'm a grown man. You can't confiscate my phone. Watch me. She plucked it from his hands and set it on the coffee table. Listen to me. Those people don't know us. They don't know that you stayed up all night with Lily when she had the flu. They don't know that you helped my mother plan her charity events even though you find them boring. They don't know that you've never once asked me for money or advancement or anything except for me to be honest with you. They see a headline and make assumptions, and their assumptions say more about them than about us. I know that. Logically, I know that. But emotionally, it still hurts. Yeah. Vivian pulled him against her shoulder. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that loving me comes with this garbage. If I could make it stop, I would. It's not your fault. It's not yours either. Remember that. They got married 4 months later, in early September, when Chicago was caught between summer heat and autumn cold. It wasn't a big wedding. Vivian had wanted something small, and Ethan was fine with that. They rented a room at a historic building near the lake, invited 50 people, and kept things simple. Lily was the flower girl, taking her duties so seriously that she walked down the aisle at approximately 1 mile per hour, making sure each petal landed perfectly. Ethan's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Richard Sterling looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo, but managed a genuine smile when he gave his daughter away. Catherine whispered something to Vivian that made her laugh through tears. Ethan stood at the altar, watching Vivian walk toward him, and thought about how impossible this had seemed 8 months ago. How he'd been drowning in debt and exhaustion. How she'd been trapped by expectations and corporate manipulation. How they'd both been so busy surviving that they'd forgotten what it felt like to actually live. And now here they were, getting married, building a life, choosing each other despite every logical reason why it shouldn't work. The ceremony was short, their vows personal and unrehearsed. Ethan promised to always call her out when she was working too much. Vivian promised to always show up for Lily's school events, even when board meetings conflicted. They both promised to keep choosing the messy, complicated reality of their relationship over the comfortable fantasy of what other people thought they should be. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lily cheered louder than anyone else in the room. The reception was relaxed, more like a dinner party than a formal event. Ethan danced with Lily to a pop song she'd picked out, spinning her around until they were both dizzy. Vivian danced with her father, and Ethan watched them talk quietly, saw Richard say something that made Vivian's eyes well up. Later, Vivian told him what her father had said. He apologized for pushing me toward Damien, for not trusting my judgment, for prioritizing the company over my happiness. He said he was wrong about what I needed and that he's glad I didn't listen to him. That must have felt good to hear. It did, but you know what felt better? She looked at Ethan, realizing I didn't need his approval anymore. I wanted it, but I didn't need it. I would have married you regardless of what he thought. You saw? Good. Because I would have married you regardless, too. They left the reception around 10, exhausted and happy, and went back to the new apartment they'd bought together. It was bigger than Ethan's old place, but nothing ostentatious. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen that didn't make cooking feel like a punishment. Lily's room was decorated with posters of horses and planets, a combination that made no sense to anyone but her. Their first night as a married couple was decidedly unromantic. Vivian fell asleep in her wedding dress on the couch before they could even open the champagne someone had given them. Ethan covered her with a blanket and sat beside her, watching her breathe, still not quite believing this was his life now. The honeymoon happened 2 weeks later after they'd managed to coordinate their schedules and find someone to watch Lily. They went to a cabin in Wisconsin, nothing fancy, just woods and a lake and no cell service. Vivian lasted 8 hours before she started twitching about being out of contact with her office. I know I'm not supposed to check email, she said on the second morning. Correct. But what if there's an emergency? Then your very capable executive team will handle it. That's why you hired them. What if they make a decision I wouldn't have made? Then you'll deal with it when we get back. Come on. We're supposed to be relaxing. Relaxing didn't come naturally to either of them, Ethan discovered. They were both too used to constant motion, constant problem solving. But they learned. They went on hikes that had no purpose except enjoying the woods. They sat on the dock doing nothing but watching the water. They had long conversations about nothing important, and longer silences that felt comfortable instead of awkward. On the last night, sitting under stars brighter than anything visible in Chicago, Vivian said something that stuck with Ethan. I spent so much of my life being afraid. Afraid of failure, afraid of not living up to expectations, afraid of wanting things that didn't fit the plan. And then you showed up and made me realize that the only thing really worth being afraid of is living your whole life without taking any risks. I didn't do that. You did that yourself. No, you helped. You kept pushing back, kept insisting I could be both successful and happy, like those things weren't mutually exclusive. She leaned against his shoulder. I don't think I ever really believed that before. And now? Now I think maybe happiness is just as important as success. Maybe more important. It was the kind of thing that sounded obvious when you said it out loud, but Ethan knew how hard it had been for Vivian to get there. How many layers of expectation and obligation she'd had to peel away to admit that she wanted something beyond corporate achievement. Real life resumed after the honeymoon. Ethan went back to work, navigating the complicated reality of being married to his CEO. Some colleagues were weird about it, but most adjusted. His team respected his work regardless of who he went home to at night, and that was enough. Vivian threw herself back into Sterling Capital with renewed energy, but it was different now. She delegated more. She left the office at reasonable hours. She actually took weekends off occasionally, spending them with Ethan and Lily instead of reviewing reports. The board noticed this change. Margaret Chen mentioned it at a quarterly meeting, saying Vivian seemed more balanced, more strategic. Richard Sterling, who now attended fewer board meetings since semi-retiring, told anyone who would listen that marriage had been good for his daughter. But the real test came 7 months into their marriage, when the cracks started showing. It started small. Vivian missing one of Lily's soccer games because of a last-minute client crisis. Ethan snapping at her because he was exhausted from handling school pickup and dinner alone for the 3rd time that week. Small frustrations that built on each other until they were having their first real fight in the kitchen of their apartment while Lily was supposedly asleep, but probably listening from her room. You said you'd be there, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice down. You promised Lily you'd watch her game. I know. I tried. But the Singapore deal was falling apart, and I was the only one who could fix it. There's always a deal falling apart. There's always a crisis. But Lily only has one childhood, Vivian. You're going to miss it if you keep prioritizing work over everything else. That's not fair. I'm doing my best to balance everything. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Sterling Capital still comes first. Like the only difference between now and before we got married is that you feel guilty about it. The words came out harsher than Ethan intended. Vivian's face went pale, then red. You knew what you were signing up for. You knew my job was demanding when you proposed. I did, but I also thought we'd be partners, that we'd figure this out together instead of me just adjusting my life to fit around yours. So what do you want? You want me to quit? Give up everything I have worked for? I want you to be present. I want Lily to know she matters to you. I want us to be a priority, not just something you fit in between board meetings. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, both hurt and angry, and scared that this was the beginning of the end they'd both feared. Vivian broke first. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, her face in her hands. You're right. I've been letting work take over again. I didn't even realize I was doing it. Ethan sat across from her, the anger draining out. I don't want you to give up your career. That's not what this is about. I just need to know we matter as much as Sterling Capital does. You do. You matter more. I'm just not sure how to show that without failing at everything. You're not failing at everything. You're just trying to do too much. They talked until 2 a.m, working through logistics and expectations and fears. Vivian admitted she'd been scared of seeming weak if she delegated more, scared that the board would use any vulnerability against her. Ethan admitted he'd been scared of becoming the supportive husband who gave up his own ambitions to enable hers. We're both scared, Vivian said finally. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that means we care enough to be scared. Maybe. But we can't keep doing this. Something has to change. You're right. I'll talk to my executive team tomorrow. Set clearer boundaries around after-hours availability. And I'll put Lily's games on my calendar as non-negotiable meetings. No client crisis gets to override them. You'll actually do that? I'll actually do that. I can't promise I won't slip up sometimes, but I can promise I'll keep trying. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a real one, and that mattered more. The changes didn't happen overnight. Vivian missed another game the next month, though she called Lily immediately after to hear every detail and made it to the next 3 games in a row. Ethan had his own slip-ups, being so tired from single parenting on Vivian's late nights that he was short-tempered and unfair. They fought. They made up. They kept adjusting and readjusting until they found rhythms that mostly worked. Lily turned 8, then 9. She stopped asking why Vivian wasn't there and started just assuming she would be, which Ethan took as a sign they were getting it right. She started calling Vivian V instead of her full name, a nickname that made Vivian tear up the first time she heard it. "Why V?" Vivian had asked. "Because you're like a mom but not exactly a mom, so you need a different name. And V is short and sounds nice." Lily said this like it was obvious. Also, it's like the letter V for victory, and you're always winning at your job. The logic was quintessentially Lily, partly practical, partly creative, entirely her own. Sterling Capital continued thriving under Vivian's leadership. The company expanded into new markets, launched innovative investment products, and maintained its reputation as one of the most trusted firms in the industry. But Vivian's style had shifted. She was still demanding and strategic, but she'd learned to trust her team, to admit when she didn't have all the answers, to prioritize sustainability over constant aggressive growth. Richard Sterling fully retired a year after the wedding, turning over his remaining board seat to his daughter. At the ceremony celebrating his retirement, he gave a speech that surprised everyone. "I built Sterling Capital on the principle that business comes first, that success requires sacrifice, usually of personal relationships and family time. I believed that for 40 years, and I raised my daughter to believe it too." He looked at Vivian. "But I was wrong. Success without personal happiness isn't success at all. It's just accumulation. My daughter has taught me that it's possible to run a successful company and have a full life, that making time for family doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I'm proud of the CEO she's become, but I'm more proud of the person she is." Vivian cried, which was notable because she rarely cried at public events. Ethan, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand and felt proud of how far she'd come from the woman who'd ambushed him with a fake relationship 2 years ago. Ethan's own career evolved too. He turned down an offer to become a vice president, realizing he didn't actually want to climb that high on the corporate ladder. What he wanted was to do work he was good at, make enough money to support his family comfortably, and go home at 5:30 to help with homework. It wasn't the path to the executive suite, but it was the path to happiness, and that felt like enough. His mother's health stabilized with the better medical care that Vivian's money had made possible. She got on the transplant list and eventually received a kidney from a donor in Minnesota. The surgery was successful. She moved into a small apartment near Ethan and Vivian, close enough to help with Lily, but far enough to maintain her independence. "I like her," Ethan's mother said about Vivian one evening while babysitting. "She's good for you. Keeps you from being too self-deprecating." "I'm not that self-deprecating." "You are, but Vivian doesn't let you get away with it. That's important." 2 years after their wedding, on an unremarkable Thursday in October, Ethan and Vivian were cleaning up after dinner when Lily came into the kitchen with a school project. "We're supposed to write about our families," she explained, showing them a worksheet. "I wrote about how we're all different, but we fit together anyway." She read it out loud. It was the kind of assignment 9-year-olds write, full of simple observations and misspellings. But one line stopped Ethan cold. "My family is proof that love is about choosing people, not just being related to them." Vivian's eyes were bright. "That's beautiful, Lily." "It's true. You chose to love me and Daddy even though we're not your real family." "You are my real family," Vivian said firmly. "Blood doesn't make a family. Love does, and choice. Choosing to show up for each other even when it's hard. That's what makes us real." Later, after Lily was in bed, Ethan and Vivian sat on their couch. A new couch, purchased together, breaking in properly with their combined weight. "She's right, you know," Ethan said, "about the choosing thing. That's what we did. We chose this. We chose each other." "Best choice I ever made," Vivian said. "Even with all the complications, the gossip, and the juggling and the fights about who forgot to buy milk? Especially with all that. Perfect is boring. Complicated means it matters. Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here, the fake relationship that had become real, the corporate warfare and the betrayals, and the moments when it would have been easier to walk away. The gradual building of something solid from materials that seemed incompatible. The truth was, nothing about their life was simple. Vivian still worked too much sometimes. Ethan still struggled with feeling like he wasn't enough sometimes. Lily still had moments where she missed having a traditional family. They still fought about stupid things and made mistakes and had to keep figuring out how to balance competing priorities. But they'd learned something important along the way. That love isn't about finding someone who makes everything easy. It's about finding someone worth doing the hard work for. Someone who sees you at your worst and chooses to stay anyway. Someone who makes you want to be better, not for them, but because they make you believe you can be. Ethan had spent so much of his life feeling invisible, like he was just surviving on the margins of other people's stories. And Vivian had spent so much of her life performing strength, afraid that any vulnerability would be used against her. Together, they'd learned to be seen, to be vulnerable, to trust that being imperfect and human was actually better than being polished and invulnerable. The world hadn't stopped judging them. People still had opinions about the CEO who married her employee, about the single father who'd landed a billionaire wife. But those opinions mattered less now. They'd built something real, a marriage, a family, a life. And that reality was more substantial than any judgment. On quiet evenings like this one, with Lily asleep down the hall and the Chicago skyline glittering through their window, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years before meeting Vivian. Not just contentment, though there was that. Not just love, though there was that too. It was the feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be, of having chosen a path that was his own instead of one dictated by circumstances or expectations or fear, of being part of something bigger than himself without losing himself in the process. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked, her head on his shoulder. How impossible this seemed 2 years ago. How everyone said it wouldn't work. Everyone was wrong. They were, and I'm glad we didn't listen. Vivian shifted to look at him. "You know what the best part is? We get to keep choosing this. Every day we get to wake up and choose each other all over again." Is that the best part? I thought it was having someone to share the bathroom with." She laughed and shoved him lightly. "You're ridiculous. You married me anyway." "I did. Best ridiculous decision of my life." They sat there in their lived-in apartment with its mismatched furniture and Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator, and Ethan thought about all the people who'd doubted them, who'd said their worlds were too different, their love too unlikely, their attempt to build a life together destined to fail. Those people hadn't understood what love actually required, not perfection or compatibility or even particularly good odds. Just two people willing to keep showing up for each other, day after day, choosing the messy reality of their shared life over the comfortable fiction of what they were supposed to want. In the end, that was the only thing that mattered. Not money or status or what anyone else thought. Just the choice to build something real with someone who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. Ethan and Vivian had made that choice, and every day they kept making it. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. That was the truth Ethan had learned through all of this. That the most valuable things in life aren't the ones you inherit or stumble into. They're the ones you choose, deliberately and repeatedly, even when the world tells you you're wrong. Love is a choice, family is a choice, happiness is a choice, and Ethan Walker, the single father who'd once been drowning in debt and invisibility, had chosen well. Cho Hinang sang.